Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 301 Rumors. Grodd of the future stood 5 meters tall and weighed several tons. It was impossible to say he was weak given his size. Strength was secondary. Thea only remembered that Grodd had acquired the ability to control his mind after being secretly experimented on by the military and Reverse Flash, a skill even Reverse Flash used as a trump card. Grodd was brutal to all his enemies, except for Caitlin. Could it be that Caitlin had been assigned to this place in the original time and space, leading to their acquaintance? Thea used her mental powers to investigate, but was somewhat disappointed. She couldn't detect any abnormalities in the young gorilla before her. Could it be anger? Thea threw another banana at the gorilla's face. The gorilla rubbed his face and lay cowardly on the ground, not daring to resist. Was she mistaken, or was it a mutation caused by the experiment, or was it a duplicate name? There were too many possible factors, and Thea secretly memorized the doubts, preparing to verify them later. Near the end of their shift, a dozen or so researchers, both male and female, met up with the two women for dinner. Thea had no interest at first, but Caitlin, unwilling to refuse such a welcome treat, practically begged her, and Thea agreed to go along. Along the way, several male researchers, their hormones surging, desperately displayed their talents, trying to attract their attention. Thea's attention focused on a quiet Latino man, Cisco Ramon, the superhero later known as Shockwave. His ability was to open portals between dimensions, and in combat, he would attack his enemies with powerful vibrational waves. Of course, like Caitlin Snow, he currently possessed no superpowers, but his value, even in his later years, lay not in combat but in his intelligence and wisdom. Many of his technological inventions, Thea believed, were as good as those of Batman. Even the original version of Captain Cold's ice gun, which Thea had obtained from the future, was his work. Thea asked him a few questions about the ice gun, but soon ran out of words because Cisco Ramon stared at her intently, not listening. "Oh, you mean the pressure reducer, right? I think this is the way to go." The person next to him poked him, and Cisco Ramon came back to his senses. He had to say that this guy was really smart. He had remembered Xia's question in a daze and racked his brains to help her find a solution. This freezing gun was designed by him in the future, so it was naturally very consistent with the knowledge he had learned. Captain Cold had a high IQ and EQ, but his education was only a high school graduate, so there was little that could be modified. Cisco Ramon just felt that this incredibly beautiful woman asked him several questions that he was best at. He was a little nervous at first, but when it came to topics that he was good at, he didn't have to think too much. From the initial inferences from one example to the subsequent inferences from one example to 10, although he didn't quite understand what Xia was asking, he still broke it down and explained it to her. Cisco Ramon lacked a doctorate and his unassuming appearance made him stand out among the academic giants. Later, he and Caitlin Snow became key members of Team Flash, and even Reverse Flash praised him as his son. This wasn't about looks, but rather Cisco's ingenuity, which impressed Reverse Flash, who had traveled from the 25th century. The relationship between Cisco Ramon and Reverse Flash was a bit like that of Malcolm and Oliver in Star City, mutual admiration and appreciation, but ultimately, their differing perspectives forced them to kill each other. Could this beautiful woman have a crush on me? Seeing Thea listening intently, Cisco Ramon couldn't help but wonder. He felt a surge of happiness, recounting everything he had learned, no matter how irrelevant. Thea felt truly enriched. After all, as the original creator of the freezing gun, he had clearly analyzed many of Captain Cold's principles, even though they knew the truth. She believed that with just a brief summary, she could create a freezing gun. When you heat a Zerodine to 100 degrees, you add a cyclotrimer. Is that possible? Thea asked after the freezing gun, then turned to the details of the atom suit. These questions, in some ways, surpassed Cisco Ramon's accumulated knowledge. The Atom's techniques, which Shiv and the Reverse Flash admired, were beyond the reach of a fledgling Cisco. But he was also a prodigy, able to explain many of the Atom's technical principles using existing knowledge. While not entirely accurate, it was eye-opening for Thea. As Thea continued to pepper his questions with profound questions, his wild thoughts were silenced by a scientific spirit. Cisco regained the rigor of a scientist and engaged in a thorough and detailed discussion with Thea. The people in the advanced research lab had initially been content to observe the excitement, but as the discussion deepened, several self-proclaimed scientists began to join in. This frustrated Ronnie Raymond, who had spent the entire afternoon preparing for dinner. Shouldn't they be discussing fashionable topics? You guys are just messing around in a bar discussing chemical reactions. But this man was truly charming. Most importantly, he'd seen Thea's photo, and seeing the men fawning over her, he couldn't help but sneer. What fools, what do they know, he asked. The chairman of the Quinn Group, worth billions, could possibly be interested in a bunch of you ordinary people. Ronnie Raymond's family background was barely top tier, giving him access to a wealth of gossip, both true and false. The rumor circulating among his inner circle was that Thea had captivated Bruce Wayne of the Wayne Group, and that the two were teaming up to build some kind of temple. Many people were over-interpreting the idea, believing it was a sham, a test of the higher-ups' reaction. Why the test? It was obvious. The Wayne Group was planning a merger with the Quinn Group. A merger of these two giant corporations would jeopardize the interests of all parties, so they fabricated a temple-building story to test the waters. Competing with the playboy Bruce Wayne? Ronnie Raymond hadn't considered such a challenge. Thea wasn't even on his radar. His target was Caitlin Snow. They had similar family backgrounds and ages, and most importantly, Caitlin Snow looked vulnerable, making her the perfect match for him. Thea dated Diana on weekends and spent her free time studying magic and her new armor, never paying attention to gossip. Batman, on the other hand, considered such matters trivial and ignored them completely. As a result, the rumor circulated within a small circle, causing no major uproar. Some people, believing they had inside information, even hoarded shares of both companies, causing a slight increase in their net worth. But that's another story. Chapter 302, Grodd's Rebirth. Cisco Ramon knew nothing of the so-called secrets of the upper class. He only knew that a breathtakingly beautiful woman was listening intently to him. Coming from a humble background and ordinary appearance, his heart was practically pounding. He didn't think much about Thea's many apparently absurd questions, only regretting why he hadn't read more books and learned more. Thea nodded silently. After Cisco's lifelong explanations, combined with her recent efforts, she finally understood about 40% to 50% of the Atom suit, but that was her current limit. Cisco Ramon was still far behind the Atom in his prime, and their research interests diverged. The fact that he could explain things to this extent was a testament to his scientific prowess. What a shame. This guy was going to be a celebrity in the future. Reverse Flash, knowing his achievements, would never let him go. Otherwise, he would have been a valuable asset to Quinn Corp. The gathering didn't last long, and they quickly dispersed. After all, the workload in the lab was immense, so getting to know each other was enough. Cisco Ramon didn't call a taxi. His legs were shaking as he walked back to his apartment, feeling like he was walking on air. He rubbed his face vigorously. He couldn't remember what they talked about the entire evening. He only remembered a beautiful woman discussing applied science with him for a long time. He lamented his lack of knowledge and pulled out 2 books, ready to study more. Unfortunately, after 10 minutes of poring over them, he couldn't comprehend a single word. He pulled out his computer, ready to search for information on Thea, just in case. He thought he and Felicity could become good friends, and his computer skills were certainly a plus, but the information he found was still disappointing. His mother was the mayor, and he was the chairman of a publicly listed company. He could find a recent photo of Thea and the new mayor of Seaside City at a press conference at the urban reconstruction site. Thea in the photo was dressed more maturely than she was tonight, but her appearance was unmistakable. It was the same person. Cisco Ramon threw himself onto the sofa. No matter how talented he considered himself, he knew the gap between them was immense. They were from completely different worlds. A budding affection, sapped by the harsh reality, truly reflected his inner feelings. Despite knowing it was impossible, he secretly observed Thea for 2 days. Then, one weekend, he stumbled upon her kissing a long-legged woman of classical beauty. He finally gave up on this fuzzy relationship. The woman was breathtakingly beautiful. Cisco couldn't decide which of the 2 women was prettier, but he knew it was a no-go. Cisco Ramon walked back to the lab alone, still feeling disheartened by the scene. Damn. 2 such beautiful women together, what a waste of resources. If such a beautiful and wealthy woman was working so hard, how much more could a poor idiot like him, Invisible in a crowd, not relax? Turning his grief into strength, Cisco Ramon put aside his cynicism and resumed his studies. Thea was unaware of the misunderstanding her unintentional actions had caused, and even if she knew, she wouldn't have cared. Every weekend, he and Diana went out together, traveling all over Earth and the galaxy. The situation at the cutting-edge technology lab remained grim. Thea had collected Reverse Flash's fingerprints and found a hidden door containing the artificial intelligence, but the lab was overcrowded. Not only herself, but even Reverse Flash hadn't found a way through the hidden door, according to her observations. Opportunities needed to be waited for. Thea spent 2 days a week in the lab, studying with Caitlin and discussing the latest research with Cisco Ramon. In her free time, she'd playfully pelt Grodd with bananas, to the point where Grodd had a reflex of grabbing his head whenever she entered. Was this guy the villain? This thought repeatedly crossed Thea's mind. No matter how she looked at the little gorilla, she saw nothing special about him, small and weak, with a weak personality. Forget telepathy, his intelligence was considered low for a primate. Glancing around, seeing no one was paying attention, Thea extended her telekinetic tentacles, ready to verify if the gorilla was the one she remembered. Out of caution, she used only 30% of her power. But Thea underestimated her current strength. As soon as her mental power entered the gorilla's brain, she heard a thump, and the little gorilla, Grodd, fainted without a sound. Thea felt a sense of embarrassment. She had been sparring with Diana more and more frequently recently, and while her mental power had only increased slightly each time, the cumulative effect, combined with the divine power, had made her mental strength far stronger than usual. Grodd had fainted so easily, how could she not realize she had overexerted herself? Just as she was wondering if she should use even 10% of her strength, Grodd groggily regained consciousness. Though the little gorilla's eyes remained blank, Thea's mental power detected a difference. She had stimulated the gorilla to a degree that hinted at intelligence. While it wasn't telepathic comprehension, or even basic logical reasoning, the gorilla's intelligence surpassed its peers. What the hell is going on? Thea was increasingly unsure of her own memories. She had saved a dead man, so was it possible that she had also stumbled upon Grodd's telepathic abilities? Then she thought about Grodd's constant refrain, "Grodd doesn't like bananas." She doubted it had anything to do with Thea constantly pelting him with bananas. Cause and effect, past and future? A cascade of thoughts clashed, leaving her feeling horrified. Had her memories changed their fates, or had she changed theirs in the first place? Thea had no idea, and could only continue to monitor the situation. Despite her disbelief, Thea noticed, unnoticed by the other keepers, that Grodd was becoming increasingly different from his peers. The confusion in his eyes was gradually dissipating, his body was strengthening, and he was now able to use simple, ingratiating expressions and gestures to obtain more food when fed. All these signs indicated that this ape was on a path of rapid evolution. After 2 more days of observation, Thea decided not to wait any longer. With a 70% probability, she was certain the ape was Grodd, the man who had beaten the Flash to pulp. Those who are not of my kind must have different hearts. This saying truly reflected Grodd's life. He had always believed himself superior to humans, his life's goal being to more efficiently destroy them. Unlike the dead, who, while acting like a jerk, were essentially good people, Grodd was completely different. Chapter 303 Father's Gift. If Thea were a true Earth hero, she'd have killed him without hesitation, but Alice, she wasn't. If non-Earthlings deserved death, what about the countless aliens in the universe? While Grodd was a 100% alien to Earthlings, there were countless creatures even more bizarre than him in the universe. It was impossible to just hoist the banner of justice and kill them all. Thea had to imprint her mark on his spirit before it matured. This mark would grow stronger as it grew, but it would also grant it power. This power was none other than the same suggestion technique Thea had used against several leaders of the Court of Owls in Gotham. As Grodd's own mental power surpassed the threshold of his species, he would experience an unprecedented surge. Then, this suggestion technique, imbued with Thea's mental power, would become a complete fusion with him. If nothing unexpected happened, it would become the powerful mind control skill for which he would later become famous. "It's hard to believe I created this thing," Thea muttered to herself. It was all so bizarre. It was her covert manipulation that gave rise to the gorilla that would later terrorize Central City. This creature wasn't some military experiment, a mutation. Understanding the whole story made sense. The military had conducted countless experiments, but why did only Grodd stand out? Because there was a mastermind behind it, and the military was simply taking the blame. Unaware of her own motive, Thea's psychic implant went incredibly smoothly. The opponent's resistance was feeble, practically non-existent. Her psychic power was like a ferocious bandit, kicking down a door and taking possession of the best house, silencing her no matter how much she called out. Thea didn't stay in Central City for a few days before hurriedly returning to Star City because Malcolm had returned from his world tour. Malcolm, hard at work, looked less gloomy than usual. Perhaps due to the sun or something else, his once fair skin was darkening. A great harvest. I found a crucial clue to the Merlyn family, was Malcolm's first words upon meeting them. Now, the necklace meant nothing to Thea. Her foundation was complete. The front half of the necklace was a wind-based acceleration spell, and the back half was a water-based healing spell, both of which Thea could easily cast with her current magical proficiency. However, seeing Malcolm's emphasis on the matter, she kept quiet. "You have close ties with the military now?" Malcolm asked, somewhat worriedly. "Cooperation with the military is essential for the Quinn Group's development, and it also strengthens my mother's political foundation. They complement each other," Thea replied confidently. "The military of a global hegemon like the United States wields far greater influence than the media reveals." While she knew there would be considerable trouble, that was the price of climbing to the top. Malcolm gazed into her eyes for a long moment before nodding. "All right, I trust your judgment," he said, then handed Thea a stack of documents. What was this? Thea flipped through it casually and said, "Do you want the shares of Merlyn Group?" "Yes, your achievements far exceed mine. Merlyn Group is just a thing of the past for me and a burden to Tommy. Although I don't know your plan, getting it will also increase your weight in the military." Although Malcolm's face was serious when he said this, his words were full of kindness. Even though Thea didn't easily show her emotions now, her eyes were a little red. She didn't know whether she should accept this gift. "Take it. I'll be based in England for the next few years and continue my investigation. Tommy, I think he's doing quite well in Gotham. I also have a large estate that he'll inherit, more than enough to cover his daily expenses. My daughter, you're my pride, a gift from the gods. There's not much I can do for you, but you must accept it. Our relationship shouldn't be exposed. You know how much Tommy loves his mother. If the truth were known, our father-son relationship would be completely ruined. You must keep it a secret." Thea's nose twitched slightly. The father-son relationship was just an excuse. Malcolm was afraid that being his illegitimate daughter would become a stain on him, so he brushed it off in a light-hearted tone. "Dad," Thea could no longer contain her emotions. Although she felt sorry for old Robert, she was moved by Malcolm's fatherly love. All right, you're so busy. Take the documents away and hold a press conference in a few days." Malcolm placed the documents in her hands and shoved them out of the room without further ado. Thea smiled. This old man, who wasn't good at expressing his feelings, spoke harshly, but tears welled up in his eyes. Back at her residence, Thea reviewed several documents. They were notarized share transfer documents. She only needed to sign them for them to take effect immediately. After reviewing them, Thea put them away. She wasn't in a rush. She took out the few drops of divine blood she had collected after the battle with Horus that day. There were 6 drops in total, 4 ordinary drops and 2 with a higher energy content. She had used 1 ordinary drop to save the atom, and Thea had absorbed another drop on Paradise Island. She had also absorbed a drop of the higher energy content later. Only 3 drops left. How do I divide them? Thea thought, her chin resting on her hand. She had originally intended to give 1 to each of her parents, leaving the rest for herself. But the divine blood was no longer of much use to her body. Even more sparring with Diana would have a greater effect than divine blood. Leave 1 drop for Tommy. Although he wasn't aware of their sibling relationship, he had given up on the Merlyn Group, and no matter how you sliced it, she owed him compensation. However, Thea was stymied by the drop of high-energy divine blood. It was too powerful for ordinary people to absorb, and giving it to anyone would be fatal. She continued to search her magic books and consulted with Cisco in Central City, eventually coming up with a solution that combined magic and technology. Both Malcolm and Moira were already in decline, and even absorbing ordinary divine blood would be incredibly difficult. Although Cisco didn't know what she was planning, he came up with a brilliant idea: divide the drop into 12 portions and administer them intravenously once a month. After a year, 70% to 80% would be absorbed. As for the drop with the higher energy, Thea divided it into 24 portions, giving half to Tommy and half to Oliver. If the two young martial artists shared a single drop of highly concentrated divine blood, they would surely avoid exploding again. What's this? Malcolm was curious about why Thea hadn't announced the news yet. Several CEOs, and their staff had already completed the handover and were packing their bags, preparing to leave for England to continue their search for the Merlyn family's descendants. Thea came to him, asked him to dismiss the servants, and handed him a silver suitcase. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 304 Quinn Merlyn Group. Although he didn't see where Thea had taken the box from, he opened it anyway, his eyes fixed on the injection inside, a bit bewildered. The spiral structure, the blue liquid, and the silver-white suitcase. Are you sure this isn't the T-virus from Resident Evil? What is this? Despite some speculation, Malcolm still wanted to know the answer. The blood of a fallen deity. I've divided the original drop into 12 portions. You absorb one portion each month. It will strengthen your body and prolong your life. Don't you need it yourself? Thea couldn't tell her father that she had sex with a long-legged beauty every week, and the cumulative effect of 2 or 3 sessions was no less than absorbing the blood directly. She didn't answer directly. One for you, one for Mother, and I've also saved some for Tommy. I can't say whether he'll gain superpowers, but his body will definitely be restored to its peak. Malcolm rolled his eyes and patted Thea on the shoulder. You're so thoughtful. He packed up his suitcase. I'm leaving now. You can give Tommy's portion to him when the time comes. He didn't inject it directly because he knew his son, a lover, too well. Unless he knocked him out and injected it directly, he would definitely give it to Laurel after explaining the purpose of the injection. He would leave his portion with him when the time came. Malcolm felt that as he reached middle age, living a few years longer or less didn't mean much. His goal was to keep his children healthier. Unaware of the problem, Thea sent old Ma away, then, accompanied by a phalanx of lawyers and accountants, rushed to Merlyn Group with his signed documents. Malcolm resigned with aplomb. Of course, he couldn't bring up the illegitimate daughter rumor. They both spoke with one voice. Thea had acquired his shares. Several of his closest associates knew the outcome, but not the reason. To prevent them from hindering Thea's takeover, Malcolm withdrew all his staff. Only a few executives remained at Merlyn Group, unaware of the situation. What? A merger with Quinn Group. The president of Merlyn Group had submitted his resignation to the board 3 days prior, and the former vice president, a mere senior employee, was now in charge of day-to-day operations. He'd assumed Thea had come in person to discuss some kind of partnership, but the beginning wasn't what he'd expected. While the merger was a success, the scam remained unclear. The vice president, sweat pouring from his forehead, urgently summoned the legal department to verify the documents. The results confirmed the authenticity of the documents, including signatures, seals, and notarized documents, complying with all legal requirements. The vice president, feeling furious, urgently consulted the remaining directors. While not unanimous, Thea's holdings clearly exceeded half the shares, meaning Thea could complete the merger if she so desired. This was Thea's mission today. Otherwise, she'd come with a large group of lawyers and accountants. Was she just here for a holiday? The merger. Start the merger process now, immediately. The vice president, a salaried employee, saw no reason to object. Following Thea's orders, he notified each administrative department to complete the handover and await further instructions. The merger of the two groups wouldn't be that simple. Thea would simply halt Merlyn's operations to ensure no significant capital outflow. She still had to negotiate with a host of directors. That's right, a host. Originally, the directors from Quinn and Merlyn might have been forced to resign due to the share dilution caused by the merger, but Thea needed to keep them on board. There were also many who held shares in both companies and had joined the board as a result of the merger. Felicity, Quinn's vice president, for example, stared at Bruce Wayne as he entered the Quinn Group with a look of astonishment. Bruce Wayne personally held small stakes in most global corporations. With the merger of Quinn and Merlyn, his holdings had amassed enough to qualify him for a seat on the board of directors. He had to make a visit after receiving Thea's call, both for business and personal reasons. Giving Felicity a subtle look to keep quiet, Batman calmly walked toward the conference room. "Welcome, Bruce," Thea said, greeting the incoming directors at the entrance. Thea and the other directors were intimately acquainted. Batman had filled 2 pages of his black book with entries about Thea. But they also publicly knew each other because of the temple attack. Thea offered a nonchalant welcome, and Bruce Wayne, displaying his playboy demeanor, engaged in a small talk. "Welcome, Mr. Luthor." Shortly after Bruce entered, a young man with flowing hair appeared at the entrance. His eyes were incredibly bright, revealing a remarkable intelligence. Thea glanced calmly at the top of his head. This guy had fine hair, so why would he end up bald? "Ms. Quinn, that's quite a feat, completing the merger without a fuss. It seems I won't be able to hold on to my title as a business tycoon for much longer. Oh, let me introduce you, this is my sister, Lena Luthor. She'll be holding my shares in the new group." Lex Luthor didn't know why Thea was looking at the top of his head, but he didn't care. He gave Thea a little sarcasm, then pushed his sister out of the spotlight, clearly expressing his support for the merger. His superb conversational skills allowed him to convey his point without embarrassing anyone. As expected of the 3 most popular villains, the wise Lex Luthor, the insane Joker, and the resilient Sinestro, each imbued with a strong personality. Thea had long admired this old enemy of Superman, but due to their different affiliations, she didn't say much, simply greeting the slightly timid girl behind Luthor who was feigning composure. "Welcome, too, Miss Luthor. I'm sure we'll have a pleasant time working together." The young woman nodded slightly and politely walked in with Lex Luke. At the appointed time, Thea checked her watch and realized that most of the directors had arrived. She ignored the few who were dissatisfied with the merger and officially began discussing the merger. After the merger, Thea personally held 31% of the new group's shares, with no one else holding more than 10%. The directors of the Quinn Group had been brainwashed and replaced by her over the past 2 years, and they were already well compliant. Those in the Merlyn Group with large holdings, receiving Malcolm's signal, dared not disobey. The remaining shareholders controlled by the government military expressed their support, and the individual shareholders, represented by Bruce Wayne and Lex Luthor, did not raise any objections. A giant multinational business group whose market value could share 1/3 of the world with the Wayne Group and Luthor Group was born in this conference room. In order to commemorate its predecessors, the group was named Quinn Merlyn Group. Thea was busy for the next few days. Similar departments were merged, while different ones were expanded or closed depending on the situation. Various supervisors who were busy expressing their loyalty and talking about their ideals blocked Thea for 3 days, making Diana think she was under siege and almost drew her sword to save her. Chapter 305, Location of the New Headquarters. How annoying! Thea dismissed another impressive middle-aged man, discarded her pen, and stood by the window, gazing into the distance. The middle-aged man she had spoken with earlier was merely a small shareholder, and logically, it wouldn't have been Thea's turn to meet in person. But despite his humble status, he had a considerable network of connections. Indeed, his every word and action represented the U.S. government and those who controlled the nation's lifeline from behind the scenes. This wasn't some cliched issue of industrial consolidation or opposition to the merger, but rather a problem neither Thea nor Malcolm had grasped. The merger of Quinn and Merlyn created a new group encompassing a wide range of businesses, including military research and development, new energy exploration, urban construction, and shipping, employing nearly 100,000 people. Perhaps this wasn't enough to attract significant government attention. The problem was that Moira was the mayor of Star City, and Thea was aggressively consolidating the group under her leadership. The new group now dominated Star City, and with Moira's support and collusion between officials and businessmen, were you planning to rename Star City to Quinn City? The beacon of freedom and democracy must not produce such news that would trigger such widespread attacks from unspeakable nations. The middle-aged man who had just left Thea's office was merely testing the waters, his words repetitive, to convey a single point: could the group's headquarters be relocated? As for where? The higher-ups felt that the 2 international metropolises in the Beacon country would be more suitable for the new group's positioning. Thea politely sent the middle-aged man away. She was now a powerful figure, her foot stomping and shaking, and she couldn't just agree to a small-time offer. There were a multitude of issues involved. Gazing out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the construction workers in the distance, Thea let out a sigh. Damn it! What kind of international metropolis are you talking about? Aren't they just Gotham and Metropolis? Those 2 awful places, from a business perspective, A big city would definitely benefit the group's development, but Thea really didn't want to go. How much free time would she have to go to Metropolis and Gotham to make money? But not relocating was inappropriate. At the very least, it would affect Moira's career, something Thea didn't want to see. Which was more important, her mother's life or the safety of the group's employees? Thea didn't even consider it, automatically choosing the former. She believed Metropolis and Gotham were certainly dangerous, but given her current strength, the danger wasn't significant. The Yellow Lantern rings were incredibly fast, and if Thea couldn't escape, few could. She instructed her assistant to check if the group had any land in Metropolis or Gotham. The new headquarters had to be large and impressive. She believed that once word got out, the government would know what she was up to, and they would reciprocate within certain rules and regulations. Fortunately, relocating the group's headquarters, buying land, building, and moving various departments in, could take a long time. For the time being, Star City would remain Thea's base. But there was only one headquarters, so which one should she choose, Metropolis or Gotham? While she was familiar with Gotham, Thea really disliked the weather. Despite their relentless efforts to keep it raining, the clouds accumulated so quickly that a few days of slacking off would bring another cloud cover. Although Thea could absorb sunlight and moonlight, she couldn't absorb obscured sunlight. Staying in Gotham for an extended period would significantly slow her growth. Furthermore, the Court of Owls had tangible influence in Gotham, and bringing her large group there would inevitably cause conflict. A minor conflict would expose her manipulation of the court, while a major one would be a catastrophic outcome, with one's own people fighting against one another. After careful consideration, Thea abandoned Gotham and prepared to move into Metropolis. The government was delighted to learn of her plans, unaware of Thea's concerns and, from their perspective, also favoring her move. Gotham was in chaos and disarray, and Wayne Enterprises was heavily controlled. The government wasn't afraid of Bruce Wayne's actions. Instead, they were plagued by the egocentric Lex Luthor. The Luthor Enterprises was impenetrable, and Lex's parents had deep connections in business, politics, and the military, making it impossible to disrupt them. Lex Luthor's brilliant mind, arrogant personality, and immense financial and human resources, how could he not arouse fear? How could he? Upon hearing that Thea was heading to Metropolis, several top executives were delighted and instructed their subordinates to expedite the merger of her new group. With the government's green light, the task, which would have taken at least 3 months, was completed in just over a month, and the Queen Merlyn Group's brand officially appeared on the stock exchange. Although investors were puzzled as to how the two unrelated groups could be merged, seeing the skyrocketing price of the new group's shares, many still enthusiastically invested in the Queen Merlyn Group. Thanks to the government's covert or overt support, Thea's personal wealth reached an all-time high, even approaching Bruce Wayne's. Many calm investors quickly realized the discrepancy and sold some of their shares. However, this still allowed Thea, who had invested considerable personal capital, to profit hundreds of millions of dollars by buying low and selling high. If this large sum of money were placed in an unspeakable country, it would undoubtedly be invested in real estate. However, Thea took out a map and scanned it, trying to find a city without superheroes. Sadly, she couldn't find any. Buying a house in this world meant expecting it to be demolished by villainous aliens. With the money in her pocket, just when Thea thought life would settle down, Amanda Waller of the ADOS arrived in person. With the military connections established, Thea's urgency towards the ADOS was less acute than it had been initially. While she knew her visit was up to no good, she couldn't dismiss her. "Amanda, you need me?" "I'm very busy right now," Thea said, gesturing at the documents on her desk. The new group had over a dozen presidents and vice presidents combined, but during the initial merger, she needed to make many decisions, and these people weren't very helpful. She hadn't had time for her appointment with Diana last week, instead summoning her to her office and spending the day together going over documents. "There's something I need your help with," Amanda said, her demeanor down. Her usual agile, unspoken demeanor was gone. Thea wasn't one to be ungrateful. Having been treated with respect, she put down her pen and prepared to wait for her next words. "I have a very capable doctoral student in archaeology named Joan Moon. A month ago, she accidentally fell into an ancient cave while conducting research in Peru. After we rescued her, several medical experts were at a loss as to what to do. She seems to be somewhat disoriented. I heard you have some medical skills. Could you help me?" Chapter 306, Enchanting Witch. Thea thought about the name and realized she had never heard of it. She thought it was probably just a mental patient, so it wasn't something she took seriously. She nodded immediately, saying, "Okay, call me anytime you have time." 3 nights later, Thea arrived at the appointed location. She was greeted by Leila Michaels again. She suspected Amanda had gone back to Hong Kong to discipline Oliver. "I haven't thanked you for saving me last time," the young woman said, smiling. The 2 agents who had entered the base with him in Coast City had died instantly. Leila's survival was entirely thanks to Thea's help, given their familiarity. Thea dismissed it as a trivial matter, stating it was simply a matter of convenience for her. If she had more magical powers, the other 2 agents wouldn't have stood by and watched. As they entered the hospital, dedicated to the eye, they were constantly met by patients with strange appearances. Some believed they could fly, others felt like they were made of stone and wanted to bang their heads against the wall. It felt like a return to Arkham. After passing through several checkpoints and entering the underground facility, Thea encountered the patients she needed to treat. "Huh? You think this guy's insane?" The woman before her was petite, with pale skin and a purplish hue of blood coursing through her veins. She was bound tightly to the bed, her body twisting and turning, her eyes rolling back, and foaming at the mouth. Suddenly, she looked a bit psychotic. But her pale face and claw-like nails suggested a curse. "Sister Leila, why are this patient's nails so long? Don't you want to trim them?" Thea asked, pointing at the woman's claw-like fingers. Leila had traveled all over the world. This was her first time seeing this patient, and she felt embarrassed. She immediately went to the person in charge to question them. "We at Sky Eye are paying you so much, and this patient's nails are almost longer than her fingers. Is this how you guys get by? It's unfair. Miss Leila, we hold her down and cut her nails every day, but they grow so fast, and there's nothing we can do. If you don't believe me, we have video proof." The person in charge, a plump woman weighing over 200 pounds, cried out in innocence upon hearing Leila's question, swearing to heaven that she had done nothing wrong and that the patient's nails were growing so fast on their own. "How can they grow so long if you cut them every day?" Thea said nothing. Leila glared at the plump woman with a somewhat unfriendly expression. She looked overweight and greasy, her face greasy. Where did she get all the money? She must have embezzled it. The plump woman's expression was vivid, as if she had suffered a great injustice. She pounded her chest and insisted that she had been cutting her nails every day recently. Leila sneered. "HMPH, every day recently? That's because we told you 3 days in advance." To avoid making a fool of herself in front of Thea, an outsider, Leila suppressed her anger and prepared to deal with her again. She didn't care how much money they were taking, she just wanted to get the job done. "Do you have the patient's brain scan report?" The fat woman was speechless, and Leila was furious. "What the hell? Such a reasonable request, just to see the film, and you can't even produce it? You didn't even take any pictures, and you're reporting this woman as crazy, when you haven't actually treated her at all." "Let me explain," the fat woman said, sensing Leila's impending outburst. With a movement unbelievable for her size, she pulled a stack of films from the other side of the drawer. "There seems to be a shadow on this patient's brain, and our equipment can't make it out." Leila grabbed them and took a closer look. The fat woman was right. Both the angiogram and the HUD CT scan showed a single, inky black shadow. "Shia, take a look." Leila flipped through the films and handed them to Shia. Thea flipped through the files, wondering if the fat woman hadn't sold her new equipment and bought a used one from an Indian hospital. These images showed something was seriously wrong with her. Even Harley Quinn, even at her madness, could still detect brain blood vessels. This pitch-black mass, is she even human? Since science couldn't be relied upon, magic was the only solution. Although Thea consciously avoided using magic in her daily life, she still used it when necessary. She opened the Eye of Horus and scanned the patient's brain. The moment her gaze met the black aura, a flood of scattered memories followed her line of sight and entered Thea's mind. Sacrifices, blood, the countless villagers who died of illness, the distant mountains, the chaotic jumble of memories assaulted Thea, causing her to take a step back. What the hell? As if activated, the Eye of Horus's surveilling function triggered the discontent of the monster within the woman. A mist of magical energy rapidly spread. The still alert Leila immediately drew her pistol and shouted. A beat slower than her was the obese woman. "Ghost!" she screamed, terrified, and dodged under the bed. Unfortunately, she'd been eating so well that she was short and plump. Her head and upper body barely fit through, but her massive butt was still sticking out, making one want to kick her. As the monster's magical power spread, the lights in the underground area went out, and several armed guards rushed in. It wasn't clear if they were there to protect Leela or the obese woman. Enchantwitch? What a ridiculous name. It took Thea some time to process these memories. Having often brainwashed others, she was quite experienced. She discarded meaningless details and focused on memories with a time, place, and person, then pieced together the person's entire life trajectory. The result left her speechless. This guy was a pure magician. And if she remembered correctly, he was the boss from the movie Suicide Squad. This was the only magical foe Thea had faced in such a long time, and Thea hesitated to act rashly. Judging from her memories, the man had lived for centuries, theoretically possessing far more magical power than her own, though it seemed to be operating with limited agility. The enchantress, now clad in a crescent-shaped headdress, was draped in a pitch-black hue, her tousled hair cascading over her shoulders. She huddled in a corner of the room, her eyes fixed on Thea with a dull stare. She knew her own suffering. She had been interrupted from her slumber by June Moon, a mere ordinary being without even a trace of magical power. Yet, possessing her, they both suffered greatly. Now, provoked by Thea's Eye of Horus, she had emerged unprepared, her plan threatening to go awry before it even began. Thea was wary of her immense magical power, while the enchantress's body was stiff and her magic was struggling. The two, fearing each other's strength, neither dared to initiate the attack. And the situation remained stalemated. Chapter 307, Battle Against the Enchantwitch. What the hell is this? Leela's hands, holding the gun, trembled uncontrollably. Although the room was dimly lit, the enchantress's green eyes were still visible. This creature is the monster that possessed your female doctor. Perhaps she was once human. If I'm not mistaken, she must have used West African voodoo techniques to transform herself into something neither human nor ghost. For centuries, she has called herself the Enchantress. The room was too crowded, making it difficult to transform with a lantern ring. Thea took out her artifact longbow and loaded it with a lightning bolt to prevent any subsequent attacks. Leela gestured to the guards behind her, asking them to leave. The room was too small. Many of the men who had rushed in seemed loyal, but they were all fat and strong, blocking the door tightly. Leela didn't need their loyalty now and wanted to get out quickly. "Can you handle this dark creature?" she whispered to Thea. "Almost. Get out now." After observing her for a moment, Thea had already noticed her physical weakness. In simple comparisons of magical power, she was undoubtedly stronger than Thea, but her body was already frozen, and it was unclear how much power she could unleash. If the other party was invincible, would she need to cower in a corner, wary and cautious? Leela, did she need to say anything? She had wanted to get out a long time ago, but those idiots had blocked the door, preventing her from leaving. After a long struggle with hand gestures, she remembered that it was pitch black, and these people couldn't see her at all. She was afraid of revealing her position and provoking the creature to attack her if she spoke. She felt so annoyed. Noticing that Leela hadn't left, but instead stood on guard with her pistol raised, Thea's attention was completely focused on the enchantress. Unaware of what was happening, she was quite touched. This older woman looked cold, but her heart was warm. "Can you understand me?" There was no point in remaining in a stalemate, so Thea had to break the silence. Unfortunately, despite switching languages, the other party remained unmoved, simply huddled in a corner, silently observing them. "Lost your vocal organs? Or still can't understand? Can you return to that body and communicate with us?" Thea suggested, pointing to June Moon, who had stopped struggling and fallen into deep sleep on the bed. But the other party ignored her. Instead, as Thea spoke more, his gaze glared at Thea with a wolfish fierceness. As both were magic users, their intentions were easy to guess. "So, you're attracted to my body? You want to drain my magic and rejuvenate yourself?" Foolish. Thea had already slain half a god, so why would she be afraid of this witch whose body had become so stiff? Sensing the other party's increasingly malicious intent and realizing her negotiation was failing, she raised her divine bow and swiftly unleashed Zeus's lightning bolt. Originally, the female revenge arrow was the best option, but it was unclear whether this woman had never done anything bad or had never had a boyfriend. The revenge arrow had no effect on her, so Thea had to switch to the lightning bolt as her first attack. Conventional lightning bolts lack the ability to travel through time and space, but as divine arrows crafted by Zeus personally for Artemis, Their power far surpasses ordinary magic and is currently Thea's most powerful single-target attack. The arrow, seemingly slow, is actually incredibly fast, generating numerous arcs of electricity along its path. When it struck the unprepared enchantress, it even unleashed a massive spherical lightning bolt. The blaze of lightning temporarily dispelled the dark magic in the room, and the few who squinted finally caught sight of the witch's dignity. Hiss! A gasp echoed through the room. The plump woman, miraculously hidden among the guards, gazed upon the witch's dead eyes, her heart trembling. This is a monster. She'll never work in this hospital again. Thea didn't have time to consider their thoughts. She only knew that her arrows couldn't kill the victim. Instead, the victim's zombie body absorbed most of the damage. She continued to draw her bow and arrows without pause. Rockets and arrows rained down on the victim's head. Frustrating. Thea was a bit annoyed. She also excelled in dark magic and mind control, their skills even overlapping to some extent. It wouldn't have mattered if there were no one around, but with so many people watching, and her cloaked in black mist, she was fighting head-on, which was a disservice to her heroic image. For now, the only option was to quickly deplete the enemy's magic power with the magical arrows from her artifact longbow. Thea's flurry of fire restored some of the ordinary people inside, and then, what else could they do? They just ran. A few of the less prepared threw their guns, shouting, "Monsters! Run!" as they ran. Chaos engulfed the entire underground facility, and panic quickly spread to the buildings above. "I'll go up there and stabilize the situation. Reinforcements will be on the way." Leela finally found a decent excuse. She said to Thea and ran out. Thea nodded. She didn't expect her small pistol to do much damage anyway. Her absence made it easier to use her many other skills. Duplicate. Seeing Leela disappear into the elevator leading to the upper floors, Thea finally played her trump card. The clone, in tune with her mind, began to coordinate her spellcasting, inflicting various debuffs on the opponent and buffs on Thea. Donning the yellow lantern ring, she materialized chains to bind the enchantress. Thea's longbow wielded unwavering force, firing arrow after arrow. By the time she'd fired her 11th arrow, the enchantress's body had rapidly expanded, summoning a surge of magical energy to break the chains. She had no choice but to resist. Though she was sturdy, 100 points of fire damage could only inflict 30, but she was outnumbered. Especially seeing Thea's clone's agility, a 2-on-1 fight. How shameless. Even her rigid mind was riled up, and she suppressed her greed and launched a counterattack. The enchantress possessed a rare ability to move. She instantly appeared behind Thea, clawing at her heart. Nothing more. Thea, whose combat prowess was considered top tier in her time, and constantly on guard against her attacks, faced her dark claws, unsheathing her Godslayer sword, infusing it with fire magic to block the claws, and then backhandedly slashed at her neck. Whoosh! The sword's strike missed, a violent vibration echoing through the air as the opponent reappeared on Thea's other side, claws clawing at her face. Thea was forced to retreat 2 steps to regain distance. A truly bizarre ability. The opponent's combat prowess was barely noteworthy, but this spatial displacement was causing Thea considerable pain. Constantly employing her agility to dodge, she inevitably slipped up over time. By the 4th time the opponent shifted, Thea finally discovered its principle: she could appear wherever her magic resided. In other words, simply dispelling the loose magic in the air would naturally break her displacement. Chapter 308, Fight Hard? Dream On. The traditional method is to neutralize the enemy with a flood of light magic, or burn it with fire magic. Of course, fighting elsewhere would also work. Thea could handle all of these methods, but she was helping out today purely on a voluntary basis. The group had a ton of issues to tend to, and she didn't want to engage in a lengthy war of attrition. The clone swung 3 beams of light, forcing the enchantress back. The main body then pulled out a dark, sci-fi-inspired weapon from its space ring. This was the latest generational freezing gun, combining the technologies of Captain Cold and Mr. Freeze. If Cisco Ramon's design 3 years later in the original universe was 1.0, and Captain Cold's modification was 2.0, then the one Thea held was 3.0. Cisco Ramon made significant contributions to the design of this gun, and it's safe to say it's at least 30 years ahead of its time. Bang, 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 bang. Thea repeatedly pulled the trigger, under the enchantress's bewildered gaze. The near absolute zero freezing air didn't care about magic or zombies, it froze everything. The enchantress tried several times to break free from the ice, But unfortunately, her body wasn't strong enough, and her magic was mostly dark, excelling at corrosion and penetration. She had no use for thawing from this massive block of ice. Furthermore, her mind was a bit slow, so Thea didn't bother to argue with her and sprayed her thoroughly. She put away her clones and lantern ring and observed her results. It was truly effective. That's the power of technological weaponry. Captain Cold, a mere mortal, repeatedly toyed with the flash. While his superior intelligence was partly responsible, the gun also played a significant role. Whoa, Thea exhaled a breath of cold air. The room was practically freezing, making her uncomfortable. She scurried out the door, encountering Lyra, who had come to her aid. Where's the enemy? Lyra craned her neck to glance behind her. Her first thought was that Thea had been defeated and was on the run. Should she run with her, or separate? You don't feel it during the battle, but it's truly freezing afterward. Captain Cold wears a down jacket year-round for a reason. Thea, now wearing only a short-sleeved shirt, felt uncomfortable in the chilly basement. Pointing behind her, she said, "Remember Killer Croc from that day? He was similar." "I froze him," Lyra, feeling the biting chill, nodded in understanding, recalling their early encounter. She was no longer the one leading the charge. She waved a hand, signaling the others behind her, "You guys go check, it's freezing inside." Avoid skin contact, Thea, feeling incredibly cold, gave a warning, but the response was disjointed as she ran for the elevator. Halfway through her run, Thea suddenly realized something. Where was the female doctor, considered a psychopath? She seemed to still be tied to her bed. Had she also frozen? Since they had never met, she could only blame her bad luck. Hopefully, good luck would come to her. After 2 cups of hot coffee in the above-ground facility, the cold finally subsided. Cisco Ramon's gun was a brilliant design concept, but it demanded too much from its user. Even Thea, with her formidable constitution, shivered. It was hard to imagine the agony Captain Cold, a mere ordinary person, must have endured. His initial goal was to tease the Flash, but his endurance damaged his genetic makeup. He truly was a formidable individual. Just when she was wondering whether to fly back by herself or have them send her back, Leela, who was out of breath, grabbed her and said, "What was it that you froze? Can you explain it to me in detail? Otherwise, I won't be able to explain to Amanda." "Okay. I saw part of that guy's memory. She was born in a small village in West Africa about 600 years ago. She inherited the secret voodoo that was very popular at that time. The locals called her the Enchant Witch. After that, there was a long period of blank memory. When she regained consciousness, she had arrived in Peru on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. It is unknown whether she was transported by early colonists in between. The last memory was that your careless doctor destroyed her sleeping place. That's about it." Seeing Leela's dazed look, Thea felt frustrated. She'd thought it was just a small favor, but who knew it would lead to such a complication? In the original storyline, Amanda could figure out how to use the heart to control the enchantress, but now, the female doctor's host had likely frozen to death. She didn't bother asking, as she didn't want to bother asking. Whether the story would continue to align with the future was unknown, and she didn't care. She extended a handshake to Leela, leaving her to ponder how to write the report. Without waiting for a pickup, Thea flew back to Star City. She'd expected Amanda to visit the next day, but the dark-skinned woman didn't show up, while the brat did. Damian Wayne, with his childish face but a serious expression, handed Thea a long bag. "The sword you requested." Thea unwrapped it. The hilt and scabbard were 1.5 meters long and 25 centimeters wide, both extremely thick and heavy. The scabbard was engraved with magical patterns in a language Thea couldn't pronounce. Thea hesitated to touch the hilt. She needed to examine it carefully. The hilt was golden yellow, its pommel a ferocious demonic head. Its arms, clasped together, formed the interlaced patterns on the hilt, and the demon's hands, interlocking, formed the guard. She tried several methods of probing, but couldn't detect any traps on the sword. Then, Thea summoned a sphere of light and circled it around the longsword, finding nothing unusual. "You're too cautious." Damian Wayne, even if he was a fool, knew what she was doing and couldn't help but sarcastically remark. Thea didn't bother to waste time with the brat. Under his horrified gaze, she created a clone and instructed her to take the sword. With a crisp sound, the entire blade was pulled out. The clone exchanged information with the original, confirming it was safe. Only after confirming it was safe did Thea take the sword and examine it carefully. What a fine sword! Without the hilt, the blade measured over a meter long and 12 centimeters wide. Made of an unknown material, the blade shone a pale white that would immediately remind anyone with a sane mind of the color of corpses. Faintly, one could hear the wails of countless dead bodies etched on the blade. Invisible to the naked eye, a crimson blood groove etched itself through Thea's eye of Horus. But before she could examine it closely, she felt a mysterious suction within the groove, drawing a small portion of her gaze inward. She quickly turned her head. She waved it a few times. It seems a little light. Just as Thea felt this sensation, she saw the sword, as if sensing her strength, gradually increase in weight until it matched her strength. Undoubtedly, this was a divine artifact, or perhaps even a magical one. Both Thea's own Godslayer sword and Diana's Vulcan sword were divine artifacts. While the three swords possessed similar essences, their auras were distinct. Chapter 309, Ninja Master. This sword, not to mention its energy-absorbing properties, inherently harbored immense power. As a magical weapon, its attributes were exceptional. Thea experimented with channeling dark magic, and discovered that the emotions emanating from the hilt were a mixture of desire, greed, and, above all, excitement. Indeed, the sword signaled excitement to Thea. After waiting for who knows how many years, it finally received the nourishment of magical energy. A faint vibration emanated from the blade. Thea swung the sword in a flowery motion, withdrawing the magic power and sheathing the sword. The sword, somewhat carried away by its own success, even tempted Thea to embark on a so-called massacre. It would be a joke if Thea, who brainwashed others daily, were controlled by a sword. Without immediately placing the sword in her ring, Thea looked at Damien and said, "I'm pleased. You can study magic with me, Damien," his face tense, visibly relieved. As for the time and place, they were ready. It was the small woods where Malcolm had once taught Thea. It was quiet and secluded, undisturbed. The land had originally belonged to Malcolm, but now it was owned by Tommy, who was still teaming up with Laurel in Gotham, so it was usually deserted. She told Damien to find a place to rest and wait for her in the woods that night, while Thea continued to attend to the various affairs of the group. It wasn't until sunset that she slowly made her way to the woods that had once given her hope. As fate would have it, it was now her turn to give hope to others. Thea walked, reminiscing, but suddenly stopped and looked behind her. A tall, thin old man emerged from the shadows, watching her from a distance. He wore a black robe with a high, stand-up collar. His face was cold, his eyes filled with wisdom and experience. "Ninja Master," Thea was surprised. This old man had come out on his own. It was obvious he had followed Damien all the way here. Whether Damien had confessed everything to him, or if there was something else going on, Thea didn't know. "You know me? Child, can you truly teach Damien those mystical knowledge?" The ninja master stood with his hands behind his back, staring at Thea. "I'm a man of my word, but it seems his mission wasn't quite what I expected." Thea could tolerate failure, but she hated betrayal. Failure was a matter of ability, betrayal a matter of character. The ninja master didn't directly answer her question, but lowered his head and composed his words. "Without my tacit consent, he and Talia alone would never have been able to seize the sword from me." Thea was skeptical. After all, the deed had already happened, so any word he said would matter. "Are you going to take your sword back, this time?" the ninja master answered readily. "I want to see if you're worthy of it." Thea smiled. 3 years ago, the ninja master would have been the pinnacle of her vision, but now he was just an old man with exceptional martial arts skills. "What do you want to see?" "I want to demonstrate your magic through martial arts," the ninja master said, drawing another sword from his waist. Thea glanced at it. It was just an ordinary steel blade. "As you wish." Thea could sense the ninja master had no intention of killing. The old man was honest, or perhaps it was because of his long life that he no longer needed to hide his actions with lies. She didn't use her lantern ring or her sacred bow and arrow, but instead threw him at his feet with a grease spell. The master's expression remained calm. A hidden bolt with a chain ejected from his left wrist and lodged itself in a tree trunk by the roadside. He leaped up, stomping his feet against the tree trunk, and swerved towards Thea at a slight angle. "Tisk, Batman is indeed a descendant of his." Thea's hands formed graceful curves, creating 2 inscriptions in the air. Spreading her fingers, a small ball of white material flew out, expanding in the wind. By the time it reached the ninja master, it had transformed into a vast net, enveloping him. Awesome, the ninja master could only repeat his old trick, dodging the web once more, and even launching a dart mid-air. Undeterred, Thea found the center of the dart with her left hand, redirected it with a flick of her finger, and snatched it up with her right hand, infusing it with her fire magic and throwing it in the opposite direction. Give it back to you, the Alliance's hidden weapon technique. The ninja master looked at the red mass. He didn't dare to take it head-on, so he sprinted to the side. Boom, the fire magic made close contact with a tree, exploding like a grenade. Seeing Thea completely unmoved and still casting her full spell, the ninja master realized he had underestimated her. He pulled something from his waist pouch and threw it to the ground. Thea watched him enveloped in smoke, speechless. This old man was like a sumped-up Batman without the high-tech weaponry. He could only slightly change the magic circuit of a half-cast spell, transforming it into another one. Old man, be careful. Look out for my shadow panther. She summoned a creature from the shadowy plane. Its emerald green eyes searched the smoke, and it quickly transformed into a gust of wind, silently darting inside. But within 10 seconds, the shadow panther was sent flying straight out. Though its body twirled lightly in the air, the fierce gleam in its eyes faded considerably. Young man, you underestimate your opponent. Just as Thea was contemplating a spell, the ninja master swooped in from behind, less than 5 meters between them. She drew her god-slaying sword, parrying the opponent's blow and delivering a punch. You underestimated me too. Seizing this golden opportunity, the ninja master refused to close the gap. He switched his sword from a vertical slash to a horizontal one, simultaneously striking Thea with his left hand. With a muffled thud, they both retreated half a step, each a little surprised. Though far inferior to Diana, Thea's divine transformation was comprehensive. She used nearly 70% of her power in this punch, but surprisingly, her opponent's physical fitness was quite good, and the blow resulted in a draw. A demonic physique? The only thing comparable to divine transformation was a demonic transformation. Considering the ninja master's past, this was the most plausible explanation. She didn't use her full strength, and in fact, the ninja master, always cautious, didn't use his full strength either. Seeing that his superior punch hadn't been enough to defeat Thea, he took a more serious approach. Shadow Leopard rejoined the fray, fighting Thea against the ninja master in a 2-on-1 battle. Using her right sword, Thea countered the opponent's attacks, completing a spell with her left. The magical rope, seemingly alive, coiled around the ninja master's feet. Simultaneously, Shadow Leopard attacked the center, and Thea swept her sword across his head. The ninja master's martial arts were truly amazing. He used a sword to cut the magic rope, jumped up with his legs, kicked the Shadow Leopard away, and no longer cared about closing the distance. He grabbed Xia's wrist holding the sword and threw her out. Chapter 310 Xia vs Ninja Master, added for Duanmu Enran. However, the ninja master was speechless. Although flung away, Thea still possessed the ability to fly without the aid of her lantern ring. With a deft 360-degree turn in midair, she swung her sword diagonally towards his wrist. With a resounding clang, the ninja master blocked the blow with his steel wrist guard. Simultaneously, a mechanism activated, 2 fine teeth gripping the sword's edge. He then clenched his right fist and struck Thea in the face. Thea spun again in midair, her left foot meeting his fist. Using the force of the blow, she yanked the sword free, her body hovering in midair. The ninja master snorted. The opponent's numerous physics-defying maneuvers hindered his many clever moves, especially since he was flying in midair. He had no reason to complain, though. He had vowed to learn magic through martial arts, and now he had indeed witnessed it, though the experience was a bit frustrating. Thea paused in midair for a few seconds, noticing no further movement from the opponent. The ninja master was nearly half demonic, yet seemingly unable to fly. Was he hiding his abilities, or had the demons merely strengthened his body, denying him any power? If nothing unexpected happened, it was the latter. Anyone who dared to make a deal with the devil must be as resolute as they are now. Thea respected him, but she didn't sympathize with him. Over the past 800 years, countless families had been torn apart by his existence, and his soul was more or less tainted by demonic influence. Seeing this old man as a perfect opportunity to test her new technique, Thea smiled and raised her hand, unleashing her most familiar dark magic. A cloud of black mist enveloped a 100-meter area. Trying to launch a sneak attack? I've trained thousands of assassins, young man, "You're using the wrong method." The ninja master remained unfazed. He wasn't boasting, he must have thoroughly mastered both sneak attacks and preventing them. Of course, Thea wouldn't assume the opponent would be caught off guard. She had recently incorporated the Enchantress's teleportation techniques into her own magical theories to redesign this new technique. Within this black mist, Thea could teleport to any magical location at any moment, using her magical teleportation to injure her enemies through martial arts. This was her first attempt at combining martial arts and magic. The Enchantress herself had no combat experience, limited to grabbing, swiping, and scratching. However, Thea's martial arts skills and her eye for finding weaknesses far surpassed hers. Combining these two, she quickly overwhelmed the skilled ninja master with her swift attacks. Is this also magic? Incredible. The ninja master was initially flustered, but quickly composed himself and methodically responded to Thea's attacks. His reflexes were so rapid that Thea's constant shifts, alternating between real and feinted moves, failed to inflict any damage. However, the ninja master's vast experience allowed him to quickly find a way out. The old man possessed incredible intuition, and coupled with his familiarity with the flaws in his own techniques, he repeatedly guessed Thea's upcoming location. The moment Thea teleported, she met his sword, forcing her to continue teleporting after several rounds. It's truly remarkable that a pure warrior could reach this level of skill. After teleporting over 10 times without success, Thea couldn't help but express her admiration. "Your martial arts are not bad, but are you practicing the techniques of the Assassin's League?" the ninja master asked casually. He had taught so many disciples, who knows how many there were in 800 years, that he simply offered a casual comment, not expecting a formal response. Of course, Thea wouldn't be so forthcoming about the origins of her martial arts. After a few more exchanges, Thea felt she needed improvement. While theoretically sound, her technique still had some practical limitations. She wondered if the guy had thought she should see if the Enchantress had any other tricks up her sleeve next time. The black mist receded, and the surroundings were once again illuminated by the moonlight. "I want to see your martial arts," Thea landed, sword in hand. Although she felt she was still far behind the ninja master, she wanted to see how far the gap was. The ninja master was a bit surprised. "Give up your magic and challenge me to a martial arts duel? You've got guts. Aside from Bruce, you're the most accomplished young man I've met in these past 100 years. I accept your challenge." He shifted his sword to his right hand, the tip pointing to the ground, waiting for Thea to make the first move. He was incredibly confident in his martial arts. After 800 years of diligent practice, he had mastered every skill in the world to the highest level. As long as he didn't employ those mystical methods, he feared no one. While Thea's martial arts skills were undoubtedly exceptional in the eyes of ordinary people, they were merely decent in his eyes. Thea suppressed her excitement. To be able to spar with a martial arts master was a rare opportunity, and she desperately wanted to know the true level of her skills, which she had practiced for years. Winning wasn't her plan, after all, she had only been training for a few years. She simply wanted to understand her own shortcomings. "Do you mind if I use a bow and arrow?" Thea sheathed the Godslayer sword and drew out her artifact longbow. Feeling that her victory was unfair, she switched to a standard bow and arrow, preparing to begin the match with her archery skills. Yes, the ninja master didn't see where she pulled out her weapon, but he remained calm. Although he didn't use a bow and arrow now, everyone who had trained under him possessed formidable archery skills. It was no surprise that Thea could shoot. It was perfectly normal. The power of the goddess of the hunt had greatly enhanced her archery skills. Even without a divine longbow, ordinary arrows could still inflict devastating damage. Pa, pa, pa. 3 feathered arrows swiftly unleashed, leaving the ninja master with no escape angles. Since the opponent could predict her teleportation location, Thea could also determine the most likely escape routes. Combat was not just about experience, but also about intelligence. "Good," the ninja master barely had time to shout before 3 sharp arrows were at his feet. He calmly slashed one with his right sword, then used the same chopping motion to block another with his wrist guard. He firmly grasped the final arrow with his left hand. He casually discarded the sharp arrows and pulled 2 throwing knives from his bag, hurling them one quickly and one slowly. But the ninja master made his first mistake of the battle. He misjudged Thea's agility. Even without the aid of magic, Thea's agility far exceeded the limits of ordinary people. She reacted quickly, exerting force with both feet and leaping into the air. Between the leap, the apex, and the return to the ground, she unleashed a flurry of 5 arrows, each one more swift than the last. The ninja master was left struggling to cope, unable to find time to strike back. Thea's assault continued unabated, darting through the forest at a rapid pace, occasionally unleashing a hail of arrows from the gaps between the trees, high and low. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 311 The Ninja Master's Depression. If the Ninja Master didn't want to take the arrows head-on, he could only retreat, the distance between them growing ever wider. Thea used the same tactics against Malcolm years ago. But the Ninja Master wasn't Malcolm. He chose to swim upstream, his tall, slender figure weaving through the hail of arrows. Using his superb vision and deft footwork, he narrowly avoided the arrows, only to strike them away with his wrist-guard sword. The distance between them was visibly close. Amazing, Thea felt her archery skills had surpassed her level, a level that even the green arrow at his peak might not reach. With intense concentration, her eyes followed the ninja master's steps, her brain rapidly calculating his next move. She drew her bow and arrow, unaiming them without even aiming. The arrow seemingly aimed for nothing, but it stung the ninja master. His forward stride was interrupted, any further step would have been met with a sting of the arrow. He raised his foot only to hastily withdraw it. Though no damage was done, his previous momentum, like a tiger descending from the mountain, was still significantly shattered. Momentum is something invisible and intangible, but it cannot be ignored unless the difference between the two is enormous. While there was certainly a difference between Thea and the ninja master, it was far from being ignorable. Limited by the nature of the world, the ninja master's centuries of practice were simply refinement, making his martial arts more refined and natural. It was impossible to cultivate some truly astonishing feats simply by accumulating time. Thea precisely detected this, constantly searching for his landing point. After 3 arrows, the ninja master's momentum was completely gone. But this man was truly remarkable. He transformed his thundering attack into a crushing blow, slowing his pace, attempting to generate new momentum as he steadily advanced towards Thea. The old man's command of momentum was a masterful combination of psychology and martial arts, coupled with centuries of confidence. Anyone facing his first, charged attack would be intimidated. Thea, after a moment's notice, knew she couldn't let him continue to build momentum, or she wouldn't be able to withstand his full-strength blow. Discarding her bow and arrows, she drew a simple steel sword, automatically ignoring her surroundings, focusing only on the tall, thin old man, and charged at him. Once within striking distance, Thea struck without hesitation, forcing the ninja master to halt his charge and block the blow with his sword. Never afraid of close combat, he drew his sword in a half circle, switching from a parry to a thrust, striking Thea squarely in the face. Anticipating his change of tactics, Thea backflipped, kicked his wrist, and thrust her sword into his abdomen. Unlike the previous clash, where Thea had used magical teleportation to launch a surprise attack, this time the two engaged in a battle of true martial arts, their moves shifting with incredible speed. Thea continuously switched between 3 sword techniques from different regions and schools, while the ninja master's swordsmanship, perhaps original creation, was heavy, steady, and reeked of the battlefield. "Young man, your swordsmanship is good, but still not as good as mine." The ninja master feinted with his right hand, then suddenly switched his sword to his left, catching Thea off guard and slicing a slash through her shoulder. Although neither of them mentioned the fight, they were both well aware that it was more of a sparring match. While an ordinary steel sword like this couldn't possibly harm Thea, the slash in her clothing still spoke volumes. Without divine transformation, she would have undoubtedly been injured by the blow. Left-handed sword, Thea was a bit surprised, but that was all. Modern society wasn't the ancient era of daily martial arts sparring. There were so many different methods of attack. Would a pistol in her left hand be enough? For Thea, left-handed spellcasting was more important. She had never practiced left-handed swordsmanship, so it wouldn't be of much use. But to continue sparring with the old man, Thea had to be wary of his elusive swordsmanship. Getting slashed by 17 or 18 sword strikes wouldn't hurt her, but it would be humiliating. She pulled a small round shield from her interspatial ring and grasped it in her left hand. That's right. It was a completely modern replica of Diana's shield. While they weren't always engaged in sex, they occasionally exchanged martial arts skills. This sword and shield combination was Diana's specialty. Shield, the ninja master's eyes lit up. He had been active during the late Cold War era, the early days of the matchlock musket. Shields, such archaic weapons, had long since fallen out of favor. Seeing Thea produce such a simple round shield, curiosity welled up. He calmly slowed his attack, eager to see what ingenuity her sword and shield combination held. Thea had been learning from Diana, initially just a few moves for fun, but her fighting skills were evident, and even with the ninja master's deliberate concessions, she still fought with vigor. Initially assuming she was simply defending against his left-handed sword, the ninja master quickly discovered that Thea's sword and shield were perfectly coordinated. The attack and defense held a classical beauty. This was definitely no whim. This woman possessed profound skills. Excellent coordination. In all my years, I've never seen anyone use a shield so well. The ninja master, intent on observing her full range of moves, defended only, putting him at a disadvantage. As Thea unleashed her full repertoire, he felt a sense of lingering delight. But as he began to exert his strength, the fight began to even the gap. Thea struggled to hold on. Honestly, Diana's martial arts were merely so-so, not much superior to those of modern Earth fighters. She relied more on her superior attributes to crush her foes. The sword and shield coordination Thea had learned from her quickly became erratic. However, her inherited divine nature from the god of war, Ares, unleashed an indomitable spirit, and Thea slowly advanced Diana's sword and shield skills. Huh? Did you come up with these last-minute variations? As her opponent, the ninja master had the most profound experience. He'd seen many of the moves before, yet as the fight dragged on, Thea's techniques began to subtly change. Originally, it was sword attack, shield defense, but with a slight shift, it became shield attack, sword defense. When the ninja master changed, she followed suit. This troubled the ninja master. A mystical mage could hold his own against someone with centuries of martial arts experience. Are all mages so skilled? He had no idea this was all due to the war god's divine power. He assumed Thea could refine her moves mid-battle, which was a bit hard to accept. The thought of Thea abandoning her strengths and relying on her weaknesses to fight him for so long unnerved him. No more. With just a few moves, the ninja master forced Thea back. Sheathing her sword, the old man stood firm. He kept his word. No more fighting. Chapter 312 Damien's bloodline opens. He didn't want to fight, and Thea couldn't force him. She shook her head and sheathed her weapon. Neither of them mentioned the demonic sword. It had caused the ninja master more trouble than good, so getting rid of it this way wasn't a bad thing. What about Damien? The ninja master asked anxiously. Logically, Damien's discovery meant the mission was unfinished. According to the customs of his Assassin's League, this was a mission failure, resulting in either death or a restart. That's why he asked. Thea pondered. I'll teach Damien, but I'll write off my debt to the League. Thea didn't know how much the ninja master knew about Malcolm's situation, but it wouldn't be difficult for someone with a keen eye to uncover their relationship. Furthermore, Thea felt that the Assassin's League's martial arts had given him the capital to rise in these troubled times, and that debt, in essence, belonged to the ninja master. Alright, that's it. Damien is in your care, the ninja master said, without hesitation, his tall, lanky figure walking off into the woods. Thea remained motionless for 3 minutes before a thin figure emerged from the other side of the woods. It was Damien Wayne. The brat was now a little embarrassed. I had no idea he'd followed me here. Thea gave him a cold look. I expected too much of you. The thing Damien couldn't stand more than anything else in his life was being told he couldn't do what he wanted. He wanted to retort, but ultimately lowered his head. He was a little brat, with a rather stubborn temper. Thea observed his reaction from the corner of her eye. This kind of brat needed to be dealt with harshly. He had to make his heart tremble at the mere thought of you. Talking about life and ideals like Batman was pure nonsense. Never mind. Even if you pass this time, your grandfather was still very kind to you, Thea sighed. The ninja master's preference for boys over girls was particularly evident here. If Damien were a girl, he probably wouldn't even glance at her. Grandfather's body. Damien wanted to say something, but he didn't know how to say it. Thea slapped him on the forehead. It felt quite good. Your grandfather is in good health. If you don't learn magic, he'll still be alive when you die. Damien didn't understand the implications of this. Did the ninja master know he was courting disaster? Thea figured that even if he didn't know at first, he should have learned after all these years. But it was easier to get on board than to get off. Demonization was eroding his body and soul. They had no family, so Thea didn't need to intervene on his behalf. The power of the Three Palaces demon was not something anyone could easily tame. She led Damien into the woods and instructed him to sit cross-legged. The ninja master must have scooped up a lot of magical texts over the years, but no matter how many of you read, you won't be able to practice anything, right? Thea sat down on the ground, gazing at the nervous Damien. Yes, grandfather has devoted countless efforts to this. We call this initial process the opening of the bloodline. First, you lack the means. Second, you lack someone with magical powers to preside over it. Finally, and most crucially, you don't possess much magical bloodline. Thea sighed at the thought. The awakening cup the swamp monster had handed her was undoubtedly a semi-artifact, and the tattered scroll had also served as a source of magical transformation. All these coincidences had led to Thea's current achievements. How are you? If the bloodline ritual begins, it will consume a significant amount of your blood. If you pass out, I can't guarantee success, Thea asked casually. The entry requirements for this path of magic were far too demanding, and some things needed to be made clear. Damien, at least, had his own guidance. His conditions were far better than her own initial blind luck. Damien answered quickly and firmly, I can do it. I won't faint even if I die, even in excruciating pain. You can't faint. Can you do that? I can. You've lost 1/5 of your blood, and you still want to stay awake. Can you do that? I can. Okay. I'll rest for a while. Fighting with your grandfather is exhausting, Thea said, then leaped onto a nearby tree trunk. Puff. Damien's blood was boiling, but she suddenly felt dizzy. In her haste, she tried to say something, but she almost bit her tongue. Of course, Thea wasn't just sitting around playing with children. She was truly tired. Drawing the magic circle was a laborious task. She'd let her clone handle it. A pure black shadow emerged from her body, quickly becoming identical in appearance and form. The clone gave her a slightly annoyed look, then lowered his head to begin drawing the complex magic circle. Damien looked up at Thea in the tree, then back at the clone drawing the magic circle. He had only briefly seen her clone skills once before, in Thea's office, and it wasn't nearly as impressive as this close encounter. The child's mouth dropped open, forgetting what he had just been about to say. The magic circle for awakening the spiritual bloodline was complex, tedious, and had a single purpose. There might be simplified versions, but Thea only knew this one, from the Constantine family magic book. The clone spent over an hour drawing it before finally completing it. The clone instructed Damien, stay still, you can talk. Damien was astonished. He had always thought it was a robot, but the fact it had expressions and could speak was a bit confusing. The clone said nothing more and quickly returned to its original form. Thea slowly awoke. The existence of the clone also drained her energy, but in the darkness, her recovery rate had greatly increased. The combination of these two factors restored a significant amount of her strength. He examined the magic circle and then checked it against his spellbook, confirming it was correct. With her in charge, no ancestral tests were necessary. Damien's initial bloodline awakening would be provided by her, making it much safer. Pointing at Damien, magic restrained his movements, carrying him into the center of the circle. I'm beginning. Thea casually cast a soundproof barrier. If anyone passing by heard his screams and thought he was abusing a child, it would be a disaster. Damien, unconcerned about her hearing, clenched his fists and nodded emphatically. The spell was extremely ancient, requiring many syllables to be pronounced with a rolled tongue. Thea's expression was extremely serious, as she chanted the incantation with gestures. Her voice echoed through the forest air, echoing new sounds before the old ones faded. The echoes echoed again, creating a resonance that filled the forest with an indefinable rhythm. Fortunately, this wasn't a battle, so she could rest whenever her mental energy grew weary. Thea rested 3 times before finally completing the spell. Her finger pointed to a certain place in the magic circle from afar, and the entire magic circle seemed to have activated some mechanism and gradually became brighter. Chapter 313, Strengthening the Naughty Child. Damien had originally intended to appear calm, to show the woman his virility, but he had underestimated the power of the spell and overestimated the limits of his 6-year-old body. Something felt like it was wriggling in his veins, itching uncontrollably. It felt like a sharp knife was pressing between his bones and skin, causing excruciating pain. The two extreme sensations continuously assaulted his central nervous system. He lasted less than a minute before his vision began to double and his ears began to ring. Having undergone some basic training in the Assassin's League, he knew clearly that there was nothing in sight and no loud noises in his ears. These were simply visual and auditory impairments caused by his brain being overwhelmed by the excessive information it was receiving. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the surrounding noise, recalling the methods the ninja master had taught him, and tried to focus on the present moment. "Call me if you can't hold on," Damien faintly heard Thea's voice through his closed eyes. Fearing he was hallucinating, he opened one eye and saw Thea rapidly flipping through a thick, black-bound book. As if sensing his gaze, Thea waved. This girl, hadn't she tried this before? This so-called bloodline opening, hadn't she tried it on anyone else? Using me as a test subject? Damien couldn't help but speculate, watching Thea's expression as she diligently flipped through the book. This was certainly Thea's first time casting this spell. After all, where could anyone with a bloodline be found in modern society? Damien's aptitude was barely adequate. With some help, he could enter the realm. Without help, he'd be too old and content to just be a warrior. His aptitude was lacking, and the magic circle Thea had drawn was too powerful. Combined, the two forces threatened to overwhelm Damien, despite his relatively strong will, in just over a minute. Seeing Damien still gritting his teeth, Thea, fearing something might happen to him, followed the instructions in the book and reduced the magic circle's output. Whoa! Damien exhaled, the tingling sensation fading, leaving only a piercing pain, a pain much easier to endure alone. His brows were still furrowed, but his clenched jaw had loosened. At that moment, Thea's lazy voice reached his ears again. Feeling better? The mana output of the mana circuit has been reduced by half, but the ritual duration has been doubled. It will last about 3 hours. 3 hours. Damien, who was closing his eyes and trying to endure the pain, almost jumped up. If it were 10 minutes or a quarter, he could still hold out, but 3 hours. The thought of giving up was dismissed as soon as it crossed his mind. Damien Wayne, would not give up, and he could not give up. What others could do, he would do too. A great opportunity was right before his eyes. Thinking of the ninja master's centuries of earnest anticipation, it would only take 3 hours. He endured it. Time slowly passed, and Damien had no idea how much time had passed. But he suddenly realized that the pain was not as severe. Was it because his body was numb? He felt it carefully. That was a factor, but more importantly, his physical fitness had improved. Stronger. No one knew how deeply Damien longed for those words. Since childhood, his father had been absent. His only companions were his resentful mother and the old man everyone called the chief of evil, ever since he could remember. Damien had set a goal for himself, to be strong, to be powerful, and not to let others arbitrarily interfere with his destiny. Though the change was slow, every second, he could feel his heart beating stronger and stronger, his bones growing stronger and stronger. His physical fitness was rapidly improving. In the past, it might have taken 10 times or 100 times the effort to achieve even this tiny improvement, but today, just sitting here, he could gain strength. This was the mysterious magic. He couldn't help but steal another glance at Thea. Our eldest daughter didn't have the patience to watch him grit his teeth. She was resting her chin on her hand, her eyes closed in repose. Damien stopped himself from saying anything. This guy must not care about his gratitude, but she could fight his grandfather for so long with just her martial arts skills. Who would have thought she was quite formidable? Thea wasn't asleep. She'd been secretly observing Damien within the circle. He was Batman's son, after all. She'd feigned sleep simply to avoid trouble. Earning the gratitude of a rambunctious 6-year-old was pointless. The pain finally ended, and then came the tingling and itching. Damien, now a much improved athlete, had anticipated this and didn't panic, but simply endured it. It felt like 1,000 worms were crawling through his veins, the aching pain unbearable. Damien wished the pain would return, replacing the tingling and itching. Unfortunately, he knew it was a necessary process, and he had to endure it to become stronger. An eternity passed before he heard Thea say, "Rest for a while and prepare for the next phase." Her voice was like a heavenly voice, and Damien felt like he'd been pulled out of water. His short black hair plastered to his forehead, and a hint of stubbornness lingered in his blue eyes, but his hands couldn't help but tremble. Thea used her magician's hand to lift him out of the circle. The physical strengthening phase is over. The next phase will be the formal coagulation of your bloodline. You'll suffer significant blood loss. To prevent yourself from becoming crippled or disabled later, go exercise and get some exercise to get your body in shape. Damien gasped for air, trying to catch his breath. It wasn't long before he felt the difference in his body. He was taller, the most noticeable thing. His vision was longer, and his hearing was sharper. He threw a few punches and kicks, and the most noticeable feeling was his increased strength and speed, a testament to the 3 hours of hardship and suffering he'd endured. He moved around for a while, gradually mastering his newfound power. He performed a few somersaults, his movements nimble and light. He'd been able to do them before, but not as effortlessly as now. You're almost recovered. Let's continue. With his consent, Thea placed him back into the circle and began the second, crucial step of bloodline purification. The light of the circle, previously a pale black, now light red. At first, Damien felt nothing different, but a wave of weakness soon washed over him. With some familiarity with a human body, he knew this was what Thea called the blood purification stage. A large amount of blood was artificially consumed, and the magic circle helped him extract the most essential part of the blood. This was the starting point of his mysterious journey. Unlike the previous stage of gritting his teeth and holding on, Damien now had to deal with endless weakness. His face grew paler and paler, and his blood was rapidly draining away. He had to fight to stay awake and avoid a coma from the excessive blood loss. Chapter 314, Magical Power Absorption, 1/10 for Alliance Leader Olimilu. How can I help? Seeing Damien's pale face, Batman, who had originally been reluctant to show his face, emerged from behind the tree. Impossible. This is his most crucial step. His bloodline can't be faked. Giving him a blood transfusion now will definitely alleviate his symptoms, but I can't guarantee what will be extracted from the bloodline later. Thea had sensed his surveillance during her initial battle with the ninja master. This 3 generations of grandparents and grandchildren was quite interesting. They appeared indifferent to each other, but perhaps the bond between them was only known to themselves. Batman didn't want to chat with her, and waited anxiously. Don't worry, this circle is safe. Damien is still young. Theoretically, the younger one's bloodline is purified, the greater their future achievements. And I'm watching over them. Honestly, this kid's circumstances are far better than mine. Back then, I had no one to help look after him, I had to rely on myself for everything. Your son is already very lucky, Thea spoke, half comforting, half cautionary. Sure enough, hearing about Damien's future achievements brightened Batman's expression. While he opposed supernatural powers, he neither supported nor opposed his son's path. As for Thea's insistence on self-reliance, he understood. Batman didn't know how much Thea had endured to gain power, but he imagined it must have been difficult and dangerous. Damien had reached this point with almost no effort, and his identity played a significant role. He couldn't blame anyone for not seizing the opportunity when it presented itself. Batman stood silently to the side, observing the results, his expression like a parent awaiting his child's exam. The purification process was swift, ending in less than 10 minutes. The glow of the magic circle dimmed. Damien stared at Thea with lifeless eyes. He had no strength to speak, but the piercing gaze was clear. Is this completed? Thea scanned him with her mental power. Damien's body was so weak that a gust of wind could blow him away, but he had already taken the most important step in his life. He already had a faint trace of magic power. Congratulations, it's working well, huh? Damien exhaled, unable to hold on any longer, and collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Seeing Batman's anxious expression, Thea knew she was in trouble. Take him back and get some rest. Have him meet me here in 3 days to begin formal training. Returning to her quarters, Thea unsheathed the magic sword, ignoring the hostility emanating from it and examining it carefully. It was undeniable that the demon's forging skills were superior to those of the gods. Perhaps it was because the original purpose of the sword's forging was different. This sword was imbued with madness, bloodlust, and brutality. Those with weak wills truly couldn't wield this magic sword. The Excalibur, with its lower attributes, could be used by anyone, making it difficult to judge the superiority of either. Currently, Thea wasn't concerned with the depth of human nature explored by the magic sword and the Excalibur. In some ways, she was much like Damien, she simply saw power. She pulled out the amulet of Isis, gifted by the Dark Woman that day, and stabbed it at the damaged spot. A vast amount of pure, Unadulterated magic flowed through the blade, but Thea didn't absorb it directly. Instead, she transferred most of it into the unicorn tattoo. The 2 trips back and forth, the surge and plunge in magic power had inflicted immense damage to the unicorn. To avoid compromising Thea's combat effectiveness, Arthas bore the brunt of the drop, and he hasn't recovered in the past 2 years. Only after Thea had transferred nearly 50% of her magic did Arthas's voice begin to emanate intermittently. It was no longer the youthful, beautiful voice of the day, but now a cute, baby-like voice. That's enough. Take the rest. Only then did Thea begin to use her magic to enhance herself. After several divine transformations, her body had already surpassed the limits of her blood purification. All her organs had turned golden yellow, and a trickle of water, invisible to the naked eye, flowed through her blood, as if it had a new, pale blue circulatory system beyond her own. This pale blue liquid was her magic. Now, the magic from the amulet of Isis was infusing this stream, its color gradually deepening, its volume rapidly increasing, and a faint shimmering light seemed to emanate from it, a sign that her magic was nearing capacity. Thea stopped drawing, drew her sword, and examined the amulet. The surface of the amulet was even more cracked. Although there was some uncertainty, the amulet could still absorb 3 or 4 more times. Probably 5 or 6 years of extra magic power. Thea casually cast a few spells. She was quite experienced with sudden surges in magic power, having adapted to 100 years of growth before. 5 or 6 years wouldn't affect her at all. The amulet's magical power was truly abundant. It was believed that any mortal who wore it would become a peerless sorcerer, but whether they would remain the same person afterward, only God knew. During the initial absorption, most of the magic power was diverted by the magic sword to unknown locations. Thea believed it was likely absorbed by the demons. This was within her expectations, and she even welcomed it. That crazy woman Isis would probably go to the 3 Palaces demon first when she wanted to cause trouble. Just thinking about that scene was truly beautiful. Of the remaining small amount, Thea gave some to the unicorn, and only then did she keep the rest. Even this small amount was equivalent to 5 or 6 years of accumulation. The amulet's total magical power was truly formidable. Thea nervously summoned the unicorn, and it responded quickly. The long-lost unicorn finally returned to her side. The towering steed of yesteryear was gone, as were the wings on its ribs. But the unicorn wasn't the palm-sized size it had been when it was first summoned. Ignoring its horn, it was now about the size of a 2-year-old foal. She was still as cute as she was when she was little. Thea grinned, playing with the unicorn for a while before sending her back to rest. She wouldn't have to replenish her lost mana next time. All her magic would be used to improve Thea herself, allowing the unicorn to grow to adulthood and allowing Thea's fusion technique to be used again. The lantern ring's power was too idealistic, and Thea honestly didn't like it. She believed she was truly powerful when she thought she was, but her confidence withered immediately afterward. This was a bit unreliable for Thea, who was severely insecure. She needed a reliable, controllable force. 3 days later, Thea waited for the unicorn to fully recover before she began her second absorption. Her total amount increased, and so did the amount of mana she could store per unit time. This time, she absorbed about 10 years of mana, and the color of the mana had transitioned from pale blue to lighter blue. All in all, Xiao already has nearly 30 years of magic power. This level is considered average in the glorious era of magic. At least it is reasonable for her to have the title of a certain wizard, and it will not cause criticism. Chapter 315, Teaching begins. That evening, Thea arrived at the grove on time. As expected, Damien had been waiting anxiously for her for a long time. "Today I'll officially start teaching you," Thea said, pausing. She'd been so busy for days that she hadn't really thought about what to teach Damien. Having never been a teacher before, she hadn't even considered how to teach him. "Is there anything in particular you want to learn?" Thea thought, asking first and then starting with what he was most interested in. "When you were fighting your grandfather that day, you moved left and right in a cloud of black mist." "I really want to learn that move," Damien said hurriedly, appearing to have given the question some thought. The kid has good vision. Is he also planning to pursue a dual cultivation path of magic and martial arts? Thea pondered to herself. This spell was indeed suitable for him. It didn't require much magical power, but it did require much more physical and reaction speed. At least until Thea understood the principle of the enchantress's teleportation, She could only rely on her high reflexes to make up for her lack of magical skills. Of course. I'll teach you the magic, and you'll handle the martial arts. Thea's point was, your family is full of martial arts experts, so I don't need to teach them, right? Damien had dealt with her several times before and understood her general mentality. She simply shied away from trouble. But there were plenty of martial arts he could teach him, so there was really no need to bother Thea. She nodded immediately, approving the lesson plan. Thea was delighted. This made things much easier. I mentioned before that your elements are dark and earth, with dark being the majority and earth being the minority. You don't narrowly believe that light is good and dark is evil, do you? Damien shook his head seriously. No, no one in his family for 3 generations had ever been associated with light, so it would be strange if he awakened a light element. Darkness excels at concealment and infiltration, but isn't as offensive as the 4 elements of earth, fire, water, and wind. However, in modern society, until your magic power reaches a certain level, technological weapons are superior to elemental magic. Damien nodded, half understanding, and Thea continued. You're truly lucky. Your attributes are perfectly suited to today's society. Stealth and unpredictability are your future fighting style. Damien's delight deepened upon hearing this. He hadn't planned to be a knight, fighting with swords and broadswords. He could stealthily dispatch his opponents, a skill that suited his character and family tradition. Thea instructed him in channeling his own magic. Damien's dark attributes differed slightly from Thea's. Damien's were more offensive, while Thea's were more dynamic. It wasn't a question of superiority or inferiority. With effective use, both could inflict exponential damage. After a week of continuous instruction, Damien's base magic power wasn't as strong as Thea's had been. After all, he was still young. After puberty, a surge in magic power occurs, which is why many children from magical families awaken their bloodlines at a young age. They don't have the luxury of acquiring amulets or magic swords to artificially boost their magic power, as Thea had. Their approach is to open the child's bloodline while they're still young, waiting for the magical explosion of puberty. While this carries certain risks, compared to the magical growth of adulthood, the risk is bearable. Damien was already able to cast dark magic with some difficulty. Of course, the range and smoke density were far inferior to Thea's, but the child was still overjoyed. Here, Thea said, tossing him a jet-black longsword. This was the sword of Azrael, seized that day in Gotham. It had been used for a while, and since the blade lacked engravings, it was only a work in progress. Considering this to be Thea's first apprentice and its significance, Thea worked with Diana over the weekend to inscribe the magic circles from the Black Mist dagger into the longsword. Diana would later be involved in crafting Batman's helmet armor. Her secondary profession, as the game calls it, was enchanting and forging at the maximum level. In this day and age, materials were scarce, and artifacts couldn't be crafted, but it was possible to create a longsword by following the same pattern. What is this? Little Damien took the sword and found it a bit long to wield, but it would be just right for him once he reached adulthood. He wasn't stupid, so he asked with a hint of disbelief. This is for you. It's very sharp. Be careful not to cut yourself when wielding it. The blade is engraved with a dark magic circle. You need to channel your own magic power, and you can cast it once a day. Thea spoke casually, as if she wasn't giving him a magical weapon, but a wooden sword or blade you could buy for $50. Damien's nose twitched slightly, and he turned his little face away, muttering a low thank you. Thea pretended not to hear. Neither of them was very expressive, and thus began their special teaching. Theory lessons were held every 3 days, and practical lessons every 5 days. But within 2 weeks, Thea couldn't hold on any longer and dragged Damien to find Batman, who was beating up a criminal in Gotham. Seeing them approach from the shadows, Batman felt a little confused. He grabbed the criminal by the neck and slammed him to the ground, resulting in a severe concussion. What's wrong? Batman, who hadn't even feared Darkseid, was now in a state of panic. Seeing Thea's sullen expression and Damien's humiliated face, he imagined a mischievous child being brought to the school by their teacher. Your child? Thea began, sounding like a young teacher irritated by a mischievous child. His foundation is awful. A mage is a profession requiring a wide range of knowledge. It's not like your friend in the blue suit and red cape who just needs a bit of strength. Have you taught Damien any basic knowledge? Thea peppered Batman with a barrage of criticism. She had initially thought teaching would be easy, but after a week of theoretical instruction, she discovered a major problem. Damien's basic knowledge was woefully poor, yet he was stubbornly stubborn, feigning understanding. But when it came to practical application, Thea immediately realized she'd wasted several nights, leading to tonight's trip to Gotham. Batman wiped a non-existent bead of sweat from his brow. As a superb student, he had no idea what his son had learned. He assumed the Ninja Master had taught him everything, and the Ninja Master also believed he, his father, should teach him. Batman was embarrassed to see two incredibly knowledgeable experts suddenly illiterate, right under his nose. "I'll study hard," Damien said, feeling a little timid. He glanced at Thea and Batman, then lowered his head. "This book. Just make sure he knows every word." "Bruce, I'm not asking too much, am I?" Thea handed Batman a thin booklet. Chapter 316, Trouble with the Sky Eye Society. Batman didn't even glance at what was in his hand. He didn't have the courage to object to something as basic as learning to read. He nodded hurriedly, overwhelmed with shame. No problem, leave it to me. I don't expect Damien to have high overall skills, but he still needs to master basic math, common sense science, and Latin. My standards have been lowered again and again. I really don't mean to embarrass you," Thea continued to ramble, but Batman quickly interrupted her. "Don't worry, I'll work hard these next few days and I'll definitely teach him. I guarantee it." Only after Thea flew away did Batman breathe a sigh of relief, remove his mask, and his face darkened. After 3 seconds of hesitation, he decided to let Gotham's criminals have a few more days of fun while he returned to assess his son's knowledge base. After a few quick tests, he realized that it was no wonder Thea was angry. This kid didn't just have a poor foundation, he had no foundation at all. This was too much. Although Damien looked barely 6, Batman had already learned a great deal on his own at this age. Damien, while appearing serious and shrewd, was actually completely illiterate. The learned Batman couldn't stand it. He ordered his butler, Alfred, to prepare a midnight snack. He wouldn't sleep tonight, and he had to make sure the child mastered the basics. Thea demanded basic reading and writing, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. How could the son of Bruce Wayne even do addition and subtraction within 10? He couldn't afford to lose face. He rummaged through his drawers, found a textbook roughly at the junior high level, and instructed Damien to understand it tonight or he wouldn't sleep. Damien, having inherited his stubbornness, didn't hesitate, picking up the book and diving into it. Thea left the task of literacy to Batman and returned to Star City alone. After days of continuous absorption, the amulet of Isis was finally shattered into dust. But its destruction was still a valuable experience. Thea had absorbed over 30 years of pure magic from the amulet, which, combined with her own magical power, was equivalent to over 40 years, but not even 50. She's still far from the level she'd faced Horus that day, but she's somewhat capable of defending herself. Over the weekend, she dragged Diana into another battle. While her overall skills still outmatched Diana's, the struggle was less intense. Things were still being planned for the advanced laboratory in Central City. In the original plot, Grodd, after awakening, wreaked havoc in the lab, attracting the attention of Reverse Flash. To conceal Grodd's existence, Reverse Flash and the military parted ways. This was exactly what Thea was hoping for, to lure Reverse Flash away and distract the lab, allowing her to enter the darkroom and retrieve the AI's source code. As everything proceeded smoothly, Thea saw off a supposedly renowned architect in the reception room. She rubbed her temples, holding the blueprints left by the expert. The land in Metropolis had been purchased, and several of her subordinates had unanimously recommended this newly minted architect, known for his many landmark designs. "This looks ridiculous," Thea surveyed the architectural blueprint in her hand, a bit speechless. Was this sign an invitation to top up? The blueprint was incredibly complex. Thea wasn't Batman, didn't understand architecture, and didn't possess a wealth of knowledge. But the design was clear. Once completed, the building would form a large Q on the ground, representing Quinn. Originally, this wouldn't have been a big deal, but there was another building in Metropolis that was L-shaped, Lex Luthor's corporate headquarters. A Q and an L? No surprise, it would be the future landmark of Metropolis. If she didn't want the Q to take on the M of Merlyn, that was something Thea didn't want. After all, this wasn't McDonald's headquarters. An M was a bit outrageous. The decision was made immediately. The Q building would be built. Just as Thea had finished reviewing the current state of the group and was preparing for a 2-day break, Trouble arose. The assistant handed her a phone. "It's the Pentagon? What's going on?" The voice on the other end was none other than General Ryan, Superman's future father-in-law. He didn't waste any time exchanging words with her, urgently demanding she come to the Department of Defense immediately. Flying there in broad daylight was definitely inappropriate, but fortunately, the military helicopter arrived incredibly quickly. Almost as soon as she hung up the phone, they were there. The soldiers were incredibly well trained, and had no problem with her professional attire. They whisked her off to the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense was becoming increasingly connected to her new group, and she was making several visits each month. After presenting her consultant credentials, Thea entered the building without issue. "What's going on?" Thea entered the conference room to find the atmosphere solemn. Almost all the generals she had met were present, and Amanda Waller of the Sky Eye Society was also in a corner. Amanda's expression was odd, a quirk between a smile and a half-smile. "Take a look," she said, flicking on the monitors inside. The images of the figures on the screen were extremely blurry, likely a partial restoration using advanced technology after the site had been damaged. "That thing's not dead?" Thea asked, seeing the dark, ghostly figure on the screen. Wasn't that the enchantress she'd frozen a while ago? Without a host, she should have been incapacitated. "We suspect she and Dr. June Moon achieved a deep fusion at a specific point in her cryostasis. In other words, Dr. June Moon has betrayed us," Amanda said calmly, as if she were talking about an unrelated passerby rather than one of her own men. "You want me to capture her?" "Where is she?" Now fully empowered, Thea was no longer afraid of the enchantress. Even from a quick glance, she could tell that her fusion with June Moon was forced. The female doctor had no magical power at all, which would only significantly reduce her strength. "Don't worry, there's more to come. She has accomplices," Amanda said, clicking on another video. The video showed a handsome young officer opening the cryostasis chamber door and releasing the enchantress. "This man is Rick Flag. He is proficient in using all modern technological equipment. He is an elite warrior of the ADI Society and also the lover of Dr. June Moon. It is unclear whether he loves his lover or is controlled by magic. You keep reading, because the real trouble lies below." The young man named Rick Flag led the enchantress into the ADI Society's cell. They carefully avoided the guards all the way and came to an ordinary cell. The enchantress walked in calmly. In less than 3 minutes, a bald man covered with tattoos walked out of the cell with her. Chapter 317 Rescue. This guy's name is Chato Santana, codenamed Vengeance Demon. He was originally a gang member, but somehow acquired these tattoos, giving him the power to manipulate fire, Amanda explained to Thea, fearing she wasn't clear. Thea pretended to listen attentively, but inwardly, she was filled with contempt. What amateurs! The power to manipulate fire? That's hellfire, a bonus from the demon inhabiting him. This guy bears a resemblance to Marvel's Ghost Rider, but his power is somewhat inferior. After all, the demon possessed is just a common demon. Even if that demon were to jump out, Thea could easily take it down with some effort, let alone a living being like him. Chato Santana, Thea muttered, trying not to laugh. That surname was truly powerful. Could he possibly be an Autobot? They've released over a dozen serious criminals from the AOC, and these two are the most dangerous. Amanda, unaware of her speculation, fiddled with the console, and over a dozen photos appeared on the screen, with the two portraits appearing the largest. The one on the left is Killer Croc. You've seen him before. I can only say he's even more brutal and aggressive than when you first arrested him. The one on the right is George Diggle Harkness, codenamed Captain Boomerang. He's skilled in the use of various high-tech boomerangs, powerful, and extremely cunning. Thea looked at her in confusion, awaiting her next words. Aren't these guys supposed to be members of the Suicide Squad? Now it seems they've switched sides and joined the enemy. But what does that have to do with me? I'm an advisor, not a thug. Can you handle them? Please tell us the truth. Amanda remained silent, and General Ryan spoke up next to her. Thea pondered for a moment. Originally, Enchantress was supposed to be the strongest, but after she had completely merged with a female doctor, her strength must have been significantly reduced. Santana, the vengeful demon, was comparable to the weakened Enchantress. Taking on both of them simultaneously, even with their cards exposed, would still be a challenge. The remaining ordinary people wouldn't pose any problem to her, so Thea simply ignored them. But being able to do it is one thing, and talking about it with these people is another. Is she bored and has nothing better to do than be the boss and work for them? Pretending to be very hesitant, what exactly do you need me for? Why summon me in such a hurry? General Ryan hesitated for a moment, but decided to tell the truth. They kidnapped the minister, and then threatened his life and captured Steve Trevor, the leader of the Sky Eye Society. Poor Steve Trevor. Xiao glanced at the dark-skinned Amanda thoughtfully. No wonder such a big thing happened. The woman had a smile in the corner of her eyes. If the situation wasn't wrong, she would have gathered her subordinates to celebrate. The minister knows a lot of secrets. If they are leaked, the consequences will be. General Ryan looked a little flustered. The old guy was as stubborn as a rock, but generally speaking, he was still very patriotic. General, with all due respect, the other party is known as the Enchantress. You can probably imagine a lot from that name. If she wanted to, she wouldn't be able to protect her from state secrets, Thea immediately explained. A leak would be very troublesome and needed to be made clear up front. The Secretary of Defense was an old bureaucrat, his willpower likely at a low point. Expecting him to resist the Enchantress's spell was a pipe dream. General Ryan knew this, but he swallowed the words back. We implore you to rescue the minister, just rescue him. Thea suspected General Ryan was going to kill the minister outright, but the idea was so horrific that even the most fearless man wouldn't dare to say it so openly. Yes, rescue him, save the minister first, Amanda emphasized, the subtext being that it wouldn't matter if you couldn't save Steve Trevor. Where are they? Are they being monitored by satellite? Thea asked. Reporting to the commander, satellites indicate they are approaching Midway City, less than 30 miles northeast of the city. The non-commissioned officer operating the satellite didn't recognize Thea's rank, but judging by her commanding presence, he knew she was no ordinary person. He vaguely addressed her as commander. Wait, Thea called out to the people inside, but without waiting for a response, she stepped outside, avoiding the satellite's orbit and taking off, using the Eye of Horus to peer into the distance. Midway City was one of the largest American cities in this world, roughly the same size as Star City and Central City. It was considered the domain of Hawkman and Hawkgirl, but at this point, Thea hadn't seen any sign of the two idiots. Was it because the time hadn't arrived and their memories hadn't yet been awakened, or was it because Horus's fall had disrupted the timeline and prevented their presence? Thea didn't know. The city wasn't far from Star City. Thea had been there several times before, having been involved in the previous urban rail project. Finding the right direction, she peered intently. The Eye of Horus quickly gathered a vast amount of information, and Thea filtered it all down. 3 minutes later, she located the Enchantress and her group. The enemy was numerous, not just a dozen or so criminals. Thea also spotted numerous heavily armed soldiers, likely several of Rick Flag's men. Loyalty is so low in modern society that it's unlikely they would betray their country for their superiors. Unsurprisingly, these people were brainwashed. Over 30 people sat in 2 trucks, most staring blankly ahead. The respected minister, tied up like a dumpling, remained in the rear truck, while the Enchantress concentrated intently on reading his memories. As if sensing Thea's gaze, she paused, nervously scanning the area, but found nothing. Thea waited for her moment of complacency before striking out. The yellow lantern ring had given her considerable knowledge of space. While it was more physical, the underlying principle was still quite valuable. After replenishing her magical power, Thea began researching teleportation, and now she had achieved some success. A pale blue portal opened beside the Minister of Defense, and Thea reached out from behind it, dragging him through. The Enchantress's mastery of spatial magic was considerable, but now, fused with June Moon, her own strength had been severely diminished. She hesitated for a moment, fearing an ambush, before ultimately abandoning the pursuit. I've rescued our minister. Everyone in the conference room was stunned to see her drag an elderly white man back in less than 3 minutes. Fortunately, there's no shortage of flatterers in the world, and a few with a keen eye quickly surrounded the Minister of Defense, exchanging greetings and greetings. The atmosphere was bustling and bustling. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 318 Negotiating Conditions. The terrified minister took a long time to recover. Coming through the portal had been awful, like being crammed like a box of sardines into a tiny container. It was incredibly tight, yet there was an immense force pushing him forward. If the minister had been interviewed about his feelings at the time, he would have undoubtedly said, "I want to die." He hadn't recovered from the moment Thea dragged him into the conference room. Now, seeing some of his former lackeys nagging him incessantly, he finally snapped out of his daze. He took in the familiar surroundings and nearly burst into tears. "My old man, how could I possibly have returned?" General Ryan shoved the sycophants aside. His status didn't faze the Minister of Defense. He instructed his men to verify the minister's identity. A flurry of people bustled about, performing pupil and blood tests, and asking for passwords. Amanda, feigning seriousness, stood erect with a sullen expression, but she was actually practically laughing. If those criminals killed Steve Trevor in a fit of rage, it would be a truly auspicious event. Although they had thwarted her Team X plan, that was nothing compared to Steve's life. Criminals were everywhere, and they could always use superheroes to recapture a few more through profiteering and moral constraints. But there was only one Steve, and as a national hero and founder of the I Society, his personal prestige was unmatched. After battling him for so many years, Amanda knew all too well that as long as Steve didn't betray the nation, the country wouldn't take action against him. The thought grew more and more palatable. Even though she knew the situation wasn't right, she couldn't help but whisper to Thea, "Where's Steve?" "I don't know, I didn't see him." Thea honestly hadn't seen him. There were only 2 cars, and he was probably being held captive in the front. She had saved him and left, and she hadn't even considered Steve a human being in her mind. Satisfied with this answer, Amanda looked down at her feet, afraid that her joy would be noticed by Thea or anyone else. A flurry of people inquired about whether the Secretary of Defense had leaked any secrets. Thea felt she'd probably leaked quite a bit, but it was none of her business. She stood up and prepared to leave. "Ms. Quinn, don't leave yet. Please stay a moment." General Ryan, seeing her about to leave, hurriedly stopped her. "I have something else to do. Whatever it is, we'll help you with it." Thea stared at the general with a half-smile. "There's a reporter named Lois Lane from the Daily Planet who wants to interview me at 2 p.m. "Look," General Ryan nearly choked on his breath. He felt helpless about his daughter's courage, but the words had been spoken. This was a matter of public and private concern, and only he could handle it. "I'll call her and explain," the general said bitterly, running off to make a phone call. Thea didn't really want to leave. Regardless of the time it took, she had saved a person, and such a high-ranking official needed some kind of reward before she could leave. Compared to the likes of Parallax and Ares, Enchantress was nothing. Although General Lane had stepped aside, Lois Lane's voice still carried through the phone. Even from a distance, Thea could hear the renowned journalist. Clark Kent had commented on his wife's article, saying it had the spirit of a tiger, a terrifying read. Thea understood this to mean that Lois Lane was a particularly fierce person. Now, this particularly fierce woman, because General Lane had disrupted her interview, had scolded her own father. General Lane presented facts and reasoned at length, finally putting down the phone and nodding to Thea. At that moment, a staff member whispered something in his ear. General Ryan's brow furrowed. After a moment's reflection, he asked Thea, "Ms. Quinn, the minister has no memory of his abduction. Do you have any way to restore it?" "I'm just faster, I don't have any sophisticated methods," Thea flatly refused. Mind control, mind reading, these were the abilities these politicians feared the most. 2 simple spells, mind manipulation and mind retracing, could solve the problem, but Thea would never admit to possessing such abilities. General Ryan's expression relaxed ever so slightly, but a grimace quickly returned. He nodded and went to study the minister's memories. For the time being, Thea settled down at the Ministry of Defense, occasionally calling the group and reading a book. It was undeniable that these people had come up with a plan. They had found, or rather captured, 3 hypnotists to hypnotize the minister separately. The final comparison results left the group dismayed. The minister had revealed more than half of what was necessary and unnecessarily revealed. Aside from nuclear weapons, which remained under the president's control, the other side had obtained most of the conventional codes. With the elite soldier Rick Flag leading the way, finding a few intercontinental missiles wouldn't be difficult. Several individuals who had previously been flattering the minister fell silent. If even a tenth of what the minister had revealed had happened, an ordinary person would have been executed without trial. But now, as the most powerful official in the room, they were undecided. Should they apprehend him first or report him to the government? "I am suspending my duties." General Ryan will handle all follow-up matters temporarily. The Secretary of Defense, having spent half his life in politics, understood his position all too well. Although he was extremely reluctant to relinquish power, he could only announce his temporary abdication, as if his father had died. Everyone had their own interpretation of his so-called temporary handling of several senior contenders for the ministerial position. The president would still need to work behind the scenes to decide who to nominate, but this old man's career was effectively over. If there weren't any major consequences, he might be able to retire peacefully. But if there were serious ones, it was doubtful he'd even see the light of day. General Ryan, who was temporarily handling the aftermath, took command without hesitation. He pondered for a moment, deciding that Thea would still be the primary force. Ms. Quinn, is there anything your new group can do for you? Was this negotiating terms? Thea watched helplessly as they staged a peaceful revolution, only to have the minister she'd rescued abdicate. She felt a little frustrated. Damn it, she was still inexperienced. She should have negotiated terms before rescuing him. General Ryan's explicit negotiation of terms was actually quite wise. With a new minister still undecided, if the terms were too high, he might not be able to take over. Empty promises would be pointless. If the terms were too low, Thea would suffer. Slyly, Thea rejected several proposals one after another, weighing them repeatedly before finally stating her conditions. Quinn Group is committed to the development of high-tech and new energy. We hope to inject capital into the Red Room Laboratory. Chapter 319 Elite Team. Red Room Laboratory. Several other potential successors were beginning to reflect. The Red Room Laboratory housed all the alien technology the United States had recovered from around the world. Dr. Silas Stone annually provided them with some advances in civilian technology, but the advanced weapons they clamored for were consistently delayed, a move that rankled both the Pentagon and the White House. The expulsion of the Red Room Laboratory from Washington might have been a warning. Thea had previously investigated the laboratory's recent relocation to Detroit, and it wasn't a good one. Funding, personnel, and space were all severely lacking. Dr. Silas Stone solicited donations, but with little success. He repeatedly encountered obstacles, believing them to be financial problems. In reality, they were clearly political, and Thea hoped to use this incident to drive a wedge between the laboratory and the government. Thea's choice of words was precise. While she mentioned an injection of funding, the subtext was that it wasn't dominant, which reassured the military officials. Ryan exchanged glances with several of the most senior and promising individuals. This offer was neither too big nor too small, perfectly within their acceptable range, and they gradually nodded in agreement. Regardless of who the future minister would be, this was a collective agreement. The Ministry of National Defense can accept the Quinn Group's offer. Together, we will surely defeat all enemies. General Ryan made the final decision on the spot. We agree to this, but only if you join us in resisting the enemy. Thea, of course, didn't hesitate, putting away her notebook and removing her glasses. What do you want me to do? General Ryan was also confused about what to do now. Less than a minute after temporarily taking over the position, he felt the overwhelming pressure. His thoughts were tangled, and he could only mumble, "We must stop them. They're the ones starting a war." Thea nodded, knowing he had no idea, but she didn't say anything. "Since you don't have an idea, I'll just wait and see. I'm not the one rushing." General Ryan was pleased with her attitude. When he stumbled upon the black woman, Amanda, he immediately had an idea. "Commander Amanda, we're going to need the assistance of the AOSCE to rescue Steve. Do you have any good ideas? We can discuss it." Amanda, who usually traveled extensively, circling the globe 3 times a day, hadn't been anywhere today. She sat on the bench at the Ministry of Defense, awaiting her commander's inquiries. She wished Steve would die right now. Rescue? You're kidding. But she couldn't tell the truth. Not only did she not have a plan, she wouldn't even say it if she had one. Every minute that passed increased the chance of Steve's death. The dark-hearted woman feigned helplessness and shook her head, her voice choking. "My thoughts are scattered. I'm at my wit's end." General Ryan, his own confusion intensifying, ignored her musings. He nodded and went to discuss matters with his advisors. "Where's Batman? He's always needed for these kinds of things," Thea whispered to Amanda, seeing no one around. "I don't know. His phone line's been disconnected. He hasn't been seen in Gotham in the past 3 days, and we haven't been able to contact him." Amanda was puzzled by this. Several undercover agents within Gotham's Mafia all said no one had seen Batman. There was something fishy about this. Thea chuckled. Batman was probably in seclusion, teaching Damian cultural knowledge. He'd even stopped fighting crime, a relentless pursuit for years, just to give his son a bright future. Being a parent was truly difficult. Her sigh didn't last long before General Ryan returned. Organize an elite team, assault the enemy, and eliminate them completely. Can we do it? Thea thought for a moment. She shouldn't get too involved. What if Steve died? Who would be held responsible? What if the secrets got leaked? He would only be a helper and would absolutely not lead the team. I'll only be responsible for those two supernatural guys. The rest of the ordinary people and the follow-up will be up to you, Ryan agreed readily, as this was consistent with their plan. He then looked at Amanda and said, the Sky Eye Society will also contribute. How many candidates are left from your previous Plan X? I've approved all of them. All of them will be equipped with explosives and sent out. This wasn't a discussion but an order. As a member of the Ministry of Defense, Amanda had to agree. She replied simply, understood, General. Since she couldn't wear her business clothes to fight monsters during the operation, Thea chose to transform with a lantern ring. The yellow lantern ring didn't conflict with spells, and wrapped in a long cloak, she looked quite magical. The parties moved quickly, and Thea only waited half an hour before she met her teammates. It was a small world indeed. There were two familiar faces, and the other two were also characters she remembered. The most striking figure was a towering man, nearly 1.9 meters tall, his imposing frame imposing as a wall. Even standing calmly, one could sense his piercing murderous intent. This man was Slade Wilson, codenamed Deathstroke, whom Thea had fought on Inferno Island. He had been both a mentor and a friend to her brother, Oliver. His presence at the Department of Defense, his eyes intact, confirmed that Oliver's friendship with him hadn't been severed, despite Shadow's presence. Another familiar figure had a grim expression. It was none other than Harley Quinn, whom Thea had captured in Gotham. Unsurprisingly, she had been controlled by a planted bomb. General Ryan briefly introduced them, pointing to the two men on his left. These two are internationally renowned mercenaries. The tall one, carrying two knives, is Deathstroke. The shorter, darker one is Deadshot. Deadshot? Thea examined the man adjusting his weapon. It was curious to think that he had been dragged into this affair, not as a criminal but as a mercenary. You might have seen those two women over there. Harley Quinn. The other one is an agent of the AOKI, codenamed Katana. Thea couldn't help but glance at Katana, wearing a white mask and a Japanese-style half-body armor. The Yamashiro couple, they were also good friends of Oliver's. Calculating the date, it should have been around the time her son died and her husband joined the League of Assassins. Amanda actually sent her out after losing her son. How cold-blooded. At least give her a few days rest. Kid, what are you capable of? You left us waiting for you. The first to speak was Slade Wilson, the Deathstroke, who was the leader of the group. Thea wasn't wearing her red dress today, so he didn't recognize her. Kid? Damn it. Slade was a man of impressive intelligence, skill, and bearing. His only flaw was his tendency to act like a senior, calling everyone a kid. It annoyed Thea a little. A ninja master over 800 years old, calling Thea a young man? That was perfectly acceptable. But who the hell are you, Slade? Chapter 320 Airborne. She had initially disregarded them, desiring to simply return to the side and complete her mission. But as soon as Slade spoke, everyone looked at Thea, their eyes filled with suspicion. Even General Ryan was watching her. Thea knew she had to show off her skills. You want to see? Then I'll show you to your heart's content. She pulled a parallax book from the void. The large golden tome immediately captured everyone's attention. What is this? My body. Facing one's inner fears without a flicker of emotion is something few can do. For those like Sinestro and Batman, it took several rounds of mental preparation. They knew exactly what they feared, and then went through a long mental journey to finally overcome it. It wasn't that Thea looked down on these people before her, they were still a long way from that level. Lisa Draka, the original owner of the Parallax Book of Time and Space, had a famous saying that Thea quoted here. She put the book away and declared, I understand fear like no one else. Though the book was only held out for a moment and quickly put away, everyone else was in a state of disarray. Huh? Thea's eyes were drawn to Harley Quinn. Of course, it wasn't her beauty, but rather how she had managed to withstand the onslaught of fear. Though her legs were shaking, she was still able to stand. Meanwhile, the bear-like Slade was gritting his teeth, his veins bulging, half kneeling on the ground. Was it madness? That was the only answer Thea could think of. If Harley Quinn could withstand it, did that mean the Joker was immune to fear? With the exception of Harley Quinn and Slade, everyone else collapsed to the ground. Katana, who had just lost his son, was the worst hit. His mask had fallen off, tears streaming down his otherwise handsome face, a look of agony. As a fellow woman, Thea felt sympathy. Knowing her area of effect attack had accidentally injured her, she felt a pang of guilt. She raised her hand and unleashed a powerful version of resist fear, unleashing it in a wide range. Magical power was unscientific. Several people rose to their feet, each responding to their own needs. Slade, however, was in the best condition, muttering under his breath, "Psychics, another psychic. I hate these psychics." Ignoring his nagging, Thea's gaze was drawn once again to Harley Quinn. Her resist fear had no effect on her, the same effect as before. Wasn't that amazing? Such high magic resistance. Neither negative nor positive effects were affected. The world of psychopaths was truly full of unknowns. "Baka, I'm going to kill you." Katana, rising from the ground, unsheathed his mask, drew his blade and slashed at Thea. Xia felt guilty, but that didn't mean she would stand and take the beating. The distance between them visibly closed. She thrust her left hand into the air, her magic compressing and vibrating the air. A dull thud was heard, and from 5 or 6 meters away, Xia gently waved her left hand, sending the man, sword and body, flying. "I didn't mean to do that. I apologize," Xia said, lowering her tone slightly. Whether the man forgave her or not was beyond her control. The samurai's sword seemed to have been sent flying several meters, but in reality, it held little power. He quickly stood up. Hearing Xia's apology, he was still upset, but he couldn't win. He could only follow the ancestral tradition and put on a mask to endure it. "Hurry and leave. Amanda will be in charge of the route." General Ryan, seemingly witnessing some terrifying scene, gave a few polite words and waved the men off. After boarding the military transport plane, Amanda, dressed in military uniform, began to explain the strategic deployment. "The most formidable of the enemies are Enchantress and the Demon of Vengeance. Yellow Lantern is in charge of these two," Amanda began, describing the enemy situation. Yellow Lantern was a name Thea had casually chosen. The remaining 3 are Rick Flag, Captain Boomerang, and Killer Croc. Speaking of Rick Flag, Amanda felt a pity. Such a skilled subordinate, tactically adept and quick-witted. Regardless of whether he was under the Enchantress's spell or not, the higher-ups' orders were simple: kill them all. She was powerless, and she tried to plead several times, but she swallowed the words. In the eyes of the higher-ups, the life and death of a single soldier wasn't worth their time. Amanda emphasized her words, as if to herself: kill them all. Leave no one alive. That's their power. Thea didn't bother to listen to such nonsense. To her, those minor enemies were nothing more than a magical artifact. If she had drawn their attention beforehand and used the Book of Parallax, she could have even wiped them out. She needed to prepare herself to deal with the Enchantress, who had regained her body. The military transport plane was moving at a rapid pace. Amanda answered a phone call and then, somewhat anxiously, addressed them. "The enemy has occupied the city square and is emitting a high-powered military electromagnetic pulse. The transport planes can't get through, and the citizens are in extreme panic. Act immediately. Act now. Parachute down and fight." Several people began to gather their parachute packs. They were accompanied by more than a dozen AOM agents, all fully armed. With the exception of the ever-smiling Harley Quinn, everyone else was a bit nervous. "I'll wait for you down there," Thea said calmly. With that, she floated out of the cabin, her yellow figure transforming into a meteor and landing on the ground. "Damn psychic." Slade, a burly man resembling a brown bear, was visibly annoyed. Without greeting the others, he strapped his parachute pack and jumped first. The enemy's electromagnetic pulse disrupted Amanda's assault plan, forcing the team to enter the city in a scattered manner. Needless to say, this was the brainchild of Rick Flag, familiar with the AOSC's fighting style. His prized subordinates were undoubtedly driven to their current position by Dr. June Moon's connections. Amanda no longer believed his men could turn back, perhaps being killed was his only option. Not to mention Amanda's anxious descent outside the city, Thea landed alone at the edge. She had originally planned to wait for her teammates to arrive before charging forward, but seeing them parachuting in disarray, she abandoned the idea and leisurely made her way back to the city. "Kid, you're really not in a hurry," a deep voice echoed in her ear. Slade, dressed in his signature combat uniform, sporting a red and black mask, and carrying 2 swords, was carrying a miscellaneous array of weapons, a dagger hidden on his wrist, a pistol strapped to his leg, and a satchel bulging with what must be grenades. Slade landed not far from Thea, and got a motorcycle in a corner of the city. He saw Thea from a distance and chased after her. "If you call me kid again, I'll kill you, believe it or not," Thea said with a grin. Chapter 321 Future Vision. Slade, masked by his mask, knew her words were mostly joking, but also meant something serious. He nodded immediately, abandoned his motorcycle, and followed her slowly toward the city center. His idea was simple and clever. With the team now separated and entering the city, if they were unlucky enough to be surrounded, even with his exceptional skills, it would be troublesome. Therefore, following this unknown figure in yellow was a wise choice. Thea could already guess his thoughts. If he wanted to follow, then so be it. Now that she was becoming increasingly powerful, Thea no longer cared much about so-called memories. Slade was a man of high quality and charisma. If he could recruit him, he would be a formidable ally. Bang! The sounds of pistols and rifles rang out simultaneously. 2 gunmen appeared from the front, left and right, opening fire on the 2 men. Slade was about to dodge when Thea effortlessly materialized 2 yellow shields, easily blocking the bullets. The 2 gunmen froze, trying to get a closer look at what it was, but they met Thea's gaze. Her mastery of fear had become increasingly sophisticated, allowing Thea to use the Eye of Horus to instill fear into their opponents at will. It wasn't magic, but rather an instinct in some ways. If you delve deeper, you could call her the Eye of Horus's terror. The 2 gunmen collapsed to the ground, and Slade, without hesitation, leaped forward and dispatched them with a single blow. "Your power is truly bizarre. It affects everyone who sees you," Slade asked, his thoughts etched in his mind. "Even they, including you, don't see me, but the fear within." The statement was impressive, but Slade, with his own firm worldview, found it idealistic and abstruse. "Is this an illusion?" he asked, still trying to explain Thea's mysterious presence with something he could understand. "This is simply the power of emotion. Illusions are much more powerful." "This isn't an illusion," Thea said, demonstrating her speed. The yellow lantern's speed surpassed all others. Slade's vision flashed before Thea had already moved back and forth several times. Between them lay 4 or 5 black-clad criminals and heavily armed soldiers. "What is this? Did it take 2 seconds?" Slade examined them closely. Yes, they were all enemies the Sky Eye Society wanted to eliminate, identical to the 2 he had just killed. "You look like you've been enhanced, too?" "Human body modification," Thea dusted her hands and asked casually. "It's a human enhancement injection," Slade replied cautiously. It wasn't hard to tell his physical prowess exceeded human limits, but he wasn't about to elaborate. So this guy had been injected with Miraculou? Had he left Inferno Island early? Thea felt her guess was almost correct. He was a self-centered person, unlike Oliver's saintly chastity. He wouldn't just save people from suffering. His moral character wasn't as high, and because of his departure, Oliver still couldn't escape Amanda's clutches. The Court of Owl's spies in Hong Kong had also been relaying information. Their reports mentioned 3 operatives from the Sky Eye Society battling American extremists in Hong Kong. Unsurprisingly, these 3 were Thea's brother, Oliver, and the Yamashiro couple. It could be said that Slade and a Japanese woman, known as Katana, had come into contact with Oliver at the same time, but neither of them knew the other. Fate was truly strange. "What are you laughing at? Do you think my power is too weak to be worthy of your attention?" Slade thought Thea was mocking him. No, you're too sensitive. I admire you. You're smart and courageous, and you know what you need. But your vision is a bit narrow. You only see the tiny space in front of you. You don't realize how vast the universe is, how many intelligent life there is. You only see Earth, and all those dollars." Thea's words were blunt, but Slade ignored her sarcasm, grasping the core of her words. "Outside Earth? Do aliens really exist, do you think?" Thea asked with a half-smile. The atmosphere between them was a bit heavy. As Thea's power grew, she urgently needed to make her voice heard on a global scale. She couldn't lose her public heroic identity, but she also needed help in the shadows to handle tasks she couldn't easily handle. The Court of Owls was plagued by internal conflicts, and her limited remote control meant that their assistance to Thea was dwindling. She desperately needed subordinates who could help her, but she also had to prevent them from backstabbing her. The solution she came up with was the Yellow Lantern Corps. Thea envisions recruiting 10 followers, 3 of whom will directly receive the Yellow Lantern Corps rings. The current candidates are Deadman and Grodd, with 1 more undecided. The remaining 7 will serve as Earth's guards and thugs. They will receive rings crafted by Diana, replicas of Thea's Yellow Lantern rings. These rings will possess some of the original rings' abilities and be controlled by Thea. The first of these 7 is currently Slade Wilson, known as Deathstroke. Slade's martial arts skills are considered respectable for Earthlings, but they pale in comparison to Sinestros. Grodd, on the other hand, is far more formidable. With his long-range, zero-cost mind control, few could withstand the gorilla's control without forewarning. Of course, this is just a plan. Thea needs the absolute best. If Deathstroke doesn't want to, she won't force him. After all, there are too many candidates in this world, and many will cling to her power to gain influence. Slade didn't refuse her offer, but he also didn't agree. He needed to carefully weigh the pros and cons. With a swish, a silver-white metal dart flew towards the two. Thea materialized a yellow shield to block the attack. "It's Captain Boomerang. I'll deal with him," Slade declared, chasing after the evasive captain, who had failed his sneak attack. This target seemed perfect for him. He certainly couldn't defeat 2 supernatural beings. Killer Croc looked over 3 meters tall and possessed immense strength, so he didn't want to waste his time. Captain Boomerang was just an ordinary man who knew how to throw darts. Taking his head back would be mission accomplished. Slade left alone, and Thea continued deeper into the city center. Soon, she heard a burst of gunfire. Looking up, she saw Deadshot, alone, exchanging fire with Rick Flag and 7 or 8 other gunmen. He was a skilled firearmsman. Though alone, he delivered a powerful blow. The high-powered silenced pistol on his wrist fired fiercely, almost like a one-man fight against a large group. Thea glanced at him and dismissed him. Chapter 322 The Strongest Manifestation. Elsewhere, 2 women battled the brainwashed Killer Croc. Harley Quinn, unluckily, parachuted into the city's inner canal. Before she could grasp what was happening, she was suddenly attacked by Killer Croc. However, Harley Quinn, with her considerable skills and enhanced abilities, managed to jam a baseball bat into Killer Croc's jaws before pulling out her pistol and pulling the trigger. Killer Croc had grown considerably taller than when Thea first met him, his atavism becoming increasingly pronounced. Without further explanation, it was impossible to tell he was once human. The continuous barrage of bullets drove him mad, and he grabbed Harley Quinn's arm, attempting to throw her to death. Fortunately, a Japanese woman named Katana arrived at the critical moment, using her skilled martial arts to save Harley Quinn. The 2 of them supported each other in the dual battle against Killer Croc. "Looks like everyone's engaged, and I'm the only one left," Thea muttered to herself, leaping into the air and quickly approaching the city center square. Unsurprisingly, Enchantress and the Demon of Vengeance were there. "You again. Government pawn." Upon seeing Thea again, Enchantress instantly recognized her by her presence. "Nice fusion. You speak American English so well," Thea said teasingly. She'd only caught a fleeting glimpse of the minister's last rescue, but now she had time to take a closer look. While the exact process remains unknown, the situation is understandable. Dr. June Moon's body couldn't withstand the extremes of absolute zero, while the Enchantress possessed magical powers but no physical form. In desperation, the 2 achieved a profound fusion, a fusion of mind, body, and soul, becoming indistinguishable. Perhaps it was this connection that ultimately led Rick Flag to embark on this treasonous path for his lover. It's almost as if the original Dr. June Moon and the Enchantress were gone. Now standing before Thea was a new enemy, the Enchantress's primary personality. With her new body, the Enchantress's spellcasting abilities were finally restored. With her new body, she could continuously draw new magic from the surrounding environment, no longer relying on the dwindling amount she'd used before. But as with everything, there's always a price to pay. In a hurry, to prevent Dr. June Moon from freezing to death, the Enchantress had to artificially slash away more than half of her own magical power, which wasn't compatible with June Moon's. Her current power was less than 50% of her peak. "Just laugh, but you won't be able to laugh soon," the Enchantress glared at Thea fiercely, then turned back to her spell. What was this person doing? Thea took a closer look. Before the enchantress lay a mass of unconscious citizens, estimated to be tens of thousands. She was chanting in a language Thea couldn't understand, and transparent tentacles were constantly extending into the citizens' bodies, carrying large amounts of blood back into the enchantress. It seems to be a spell to enhance bloodline potential. Thea had never seen this spell before, but she could still discern the principle. It was similar to the process she had used to purify Damien's blood for magical extraction. The enchantress wasn't trying to extract magic, she was aiming to enhance her magical affinity. Through massive blood transfusions and purification, she was enhancing Dr. Junmoon's inherently lacking physical qualities. Artificially creating magical physiques through this bloody process. Such a tedious process was truly difficult for her. Thea felt a modicum of sympathy for her, but the fight still had to be fought. She pulled out her freezing gun and fired at the enchantress. A more righteous hero would have shouted nonsense like lay down your weapons, resist and be punished severely, but Thea had no such a habit. The refrigerant and cryogenic reactor swiftly spewed forth a cloud of freezing gas. Stop her, the enchantress shouted at the tattooed vengeful demon, Chato Santana. Chato Santana, evidently undeterred by her indoctrination, looked helpless, but he still stood up, his hands blazing, to block Thea's freezing gas. His deep black flames were indeed impressive, briefly evenly matching the icy gas. I don't want to be your enemy. I just want to see my family again. While the flames and icy gas were evenly matched, Thea's was a technological weapon, requiring no energy consumption. Chato Santana, on the other hand, was using his own energy, each bit of which had to circulate through his body. In less than a minute, his flames were no longer as intense as they had been at first. Give up resistance. We'll help you. This guy is killing innocent people. Can't you see? Thea couldn't understand the conditions the enchantress had offered him, trying to lure him back to her side. This, Chato Santana wasn't blind. The enchantress's tactics, except a bit cleaner, were no different from the blood sacrifices in the movies. Think of the family you mistakenly killed. When I regain my strength, I'll let you see them again. The enchantress, now in a new body, was no longer as silent as before. While Thea spoke of public morality, she was concerned with personal gain. After much deliberation, Chato Santana finally gritted his teeth and made up his mind. He said to Thea, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you. What a joke. You think you can stop me with the power of that lowly demon? Thea's eyebrows shot up. She believed the three palace demons' words, but the nameless demon within Chato Santana was no match for him. Let me show you what a demon is. A former gangster, an African witch sealed for centuries, Thea was ready to show them the true power of a demon. The yellow lantern ring activated at full power, materializing a flood of fear, multiplying it tenfold and 100-fold. A thick, dark yellow smoke swirled over the square, and the enchantress and the vengeance demon stared intently. As the smoke cleared, the first thing they saw was the demonic creature's curved horns, resembling a ram's. Its eyes were filled with a terrifying aura, and sulfur seemed to drip from its mouth. The demon, with wrist blades draped across its slender arms, seemed displeased with the smoke. With a powerful flick of its hands, the smoke instantly dissipated. The demon slowly stepped out, its knuckle-jointed hooves stomping the ground, its massive tail whipping around, seemingly dissatisfied with its surroundings. Huh? Thea exclaimed softly. She had intended to manifest a burly Diablo, but, seemingly due to her female nature, a slender female Diablo appeared instead. However, manifesting the god of fear with the emotion of fear was a perfect match. The feeling now was of being able to manipulate the fingers of her own arm. The two intertwined, and Thea even felt her understanding of fear deepen. This was incredible. Her understanding of fear was already unparalleled. And now it seemed to have reached a new level. How could she not be surprised? Chapter 323 Crushing. Flying into the body of the manifested demon, the two merged seamlessly, as if they had always been one. Defeating these two wouldn't require such a large stature. Thea concentrated all her energy into materializing the details, bringing every line and muscle of the demon's body to life. The manifested demon's 10-meter-tall form took a step forward, its immense force causing the ground within a mile to vibrate. Roar, as if to vent his inner exhilaration, the demon spread his arms and roared to the heavens. A heat wave spread in all directions, visibly raising the temperature in the square. Moisture in the air evaporated rapidly, and a twitch of the nose revealed the pervasive odor of burnt sulfur. The hair of many unconscious citizens curled. What is this? The enchantress might simply have felt the power, but the vengeful demon, Shadow Santana, felt much more profoundly. This was a high-ranking demon from hell. As for just how high, the demon trembling within him gave a pretty good idea. You're not going to accept a toast, so you'll have to drink for it. Who gave you the guts to play with fire in my presence? I'll show you the true flames of hell. Thea's voice emanated from the demon's mouth. Its once melodious, crisp voice sounded like it had been cut by a saw, each word punctuated by a distinctive hissing noise. Fire Tornado, the ferocious demon clasped his hands together, gathering a vast mass of emotional energy. With her now greatly enhanced magical power, Thea infused it with a vast amount of fire and wind magic. This infusion of magic was like throwing a match into a pot of oil. The two different magical properties instantly made the energy mass raging and uncontrollable. The demon's mouth widened in a terrifying smile. He grasped the energy mass in one hand and hurled it at the immobilized enchantress. As if to intimidate them, Thea's throw was slow. Upon contact with debris, the energy mass rapidly expanded 1,000-fold and began to spin rapidly, sucking the debris in the square into the center of the vortex, further accelerating the formation of the fire tornado. In less than 3 seconds, a fiery red tornado, 100 meters high and over 10 meters in diameter, had formed. As the debris piled up, the centrifugal force grew, and the tornado's diameter grew to 20, then 30 meters, seemingly endlessly, as it barreled towards the two. Stop her. Attack her. The enchantress's words were a bit off-kilter, her meaning confused. Perhaps she didn't know what to do. Former gangster Shadow Santana was much calmer than her. He secretly despised the old African, suppressing the demonic force within him that wanted to escape. With a roar, his eyes and mouth blazed, and he emerged as a 3-meter-tall flaming demon. The demon clenched its fists, blocking the enchantress, as if attempting to absorb the fire tornado on its own. Idiot, Thea scoffed at his actions. The constant emanation of energy revealed that he hadn't studied demonic transformation at all. He thought he could carry the power of hell in a mortal body? It was a dream. If it were that simple, wouldn't ancient wizards have studied magic? Could they have just captured a demon and stuffed it into their bodies? Not only could this creature not control the overflowing energy, but he even tried to use this transformation, whose power was decreasing by the second, to fend off the fire tornado. Thea was speechless. Not only could he, but even Thea, the one who cast it, be unable to control it. Demonic magic was always like this. They never considered the consequences, using whatever power they could. Environmental damage was simply not on their vocabulary. Shadow Santana, fearless and clueless, bravely stood before a fiery tornado hundreds of meters high, its diameter stretching as far as the eye could see. Suddenly, he realized something. His education hadn't taught him how to resist a tornado. It was too late to ask his teachers at school. He could only grip the ground firmly with his feet and muster all his magical power to fight the tornado head-on. Thea, manifesting as Diablo, nearly laughed out loud as she watched through the demon's eyes. The guy raised his hands to the sky, a gesture so foolish, so completely idiotic. Then, amidst her gloating expression, Shadow Santana was instantly swept into the tornado. Far from stopping it, his continuously overflowing magic power actually increased its overall energy. Her external reinforcements proved of no help at all, leaving the enchantress with a difficult choice: abandon the civilians on the ground or endure the situation. Her decision was swift. She chose to endure the situation, using all her magic power to summon a pitch-black tornado, but swerving in the opposite direction of Thea's tornado to mitigate some of the wind speed. She then placed 3 earthen walls, 10 meters high and over 5 meters thick, in front of the tornado's approach. HMPH, you underestimated me. I'll give you another hard time. Thea wondered why the man didn't teleport away, but chose to endure the situation. It was completely out of character. Whether this spell, which improved her physical condition, could only be used once, or whether she was simply greedy and unwilling to give up the blood essence she had obtained, Thea didn't know. But she knew that if the enemy didn't flee, she could switch to a more powerful move. The manifested demon took a deep breath, absorbing the energy and emotions overflowing from the surrounding air. Countless energies gathered in her mouth, and Thea didn't hesitate this time, infusing all 4 of her own attributes, light, darkness, fire, and wind, into it. The demon first leaned back, absorbing the energy, then lunged forward, releasing the energy gathered in her mouth in a beam. Red and blue flash alternately, and a massive bolt of lightning, over 2 meters in diameter, shot out. This attack was incredibly fast, catching the enchantress off guard. The lightning breath arrived before the fire tornado, slamming directly into the earthen wall she had erected. This move was a channeled technique, not a one-shot deal. Thea continuously manipulated the manifested demon, tried new energy to the lightning breath. The lightning beam struck the enchantress's earthen wall, instantly piercing the first layer. The enchantress was horrified and frantically poured her magic into the second wall, attempting to stabilize it. However, Thea's total magic power surpassed hers, and she was also controlled by the manifested demon. One targeted damage, the other area defense. The superiority was obvious. The second wall lasted less than 10 seconds before being breached again. The enchantress had no time to be surprised, as Thea suddenly launched another attack, attempting to take her down with a single blow. "I'll hold it, you set up defenses," roared Chato Santana, who had been swept up into the air. The enchantress's reverse tornado had some effect, at least weakening the section force considerably. Chato struggled to break free, but as a grasshopper on a rope, he saw that the enchantress could not block it, so he had no choice but to bite the bullet and take Thea's lightning breath himself. Chapter 324 Suppression. Facing the red and blue lightning bolts blasted by the manifested demon, Chato wasn't sure if he could withstand them. However, he possessed a strength, or perhaps a weakness, stubbornness. He would do what he believed was right, regardless of anyone or anything. This was true when he surrendered to the Sky Eye, and it was the same now as he faced Thea's lightning bolts. The demonic power draining away with each passing second was already wearing him down. Knowing he only had the strength for this one strike, he clenched his fists, bent his knees, and summoned all his infernal flames to charge towards the lightning bolt. Bang! A resounding egg-hitting stone was a bit of an exaggeration, as Chato did block it for a little over a second. His infernal fire only slightly slowed the lightning bolt's speed. From then on, it was his body that faced the lightning's breath. His palms and wrists were vaporized by the massive energy beam. Perhaps sensing a life-or-death crisis, the demon within him manipulated his body to deflect slightly, saving his life. However, his right arm and shoulder were completely blasted, leaving nothing behind. Without a single polite word, Chato Santana fell unconscious. The demon within him was severely damaged, forcing it to enter a dormant state. Fortunately, his valiant resistance did consume a significant amount of the lightning beam's energy, buying the enchantress time to regroup. This time, she didn't resist, but instead opened a massive portal in the path of the lightning beam. A torrent of lightning energy poured in. The enchantress gritted her teeth to prevent the portal from bursting under the energy. After a full 5 seconds, she finally managed to divert the entire lightning beam. As for where it went, she didn't bother to investigate. A portal could be used this way. Thea, new to teleportation, was impressed by the scene. As usual, the demon's attacks were reckless, unstoppable. With a lightning breath just now, she had to run, she couldn't take it head-on. This attack drained the manifested demon's energy, shrunk by half from its original 10-meter height to just 5 meters. Thea consumed only emotional energy, not much of her own. The enchantress across from her wasn't faring so well. She was already struggling to maintain the magic circle beneath her, but she was forced to exert all her might to open the portal. The backlash from the magic circle and the intense strain on her magical energy significantly exacerbated the hidden dangers within her body. After all, the original owner of this body, Dr. June Moon, wasn't particularly magical, and such a forced use of magic would severely damage the original body. Her once 30-something Caucasian features now looked 20 years older, her face wrinkled and her hair wiry, a sign of the magic rejecting her body. Suppress her, Thea mentally commanded the manifested demon, drawing her own magic sword and flying over to the unconscious Chato. She stabbed once, but there was no reaction. She stabbed again, still no reaction. Could it be that this sword had no effect on demons? Thea couldn't help but wonder. Those who forged the magic sword were quite righteous. A demon fighting a demon? Unconvinced, Thea stabbed twice more, causing the unconscious Chato Santana to vomit blood. Only then did she finally confirm that the sword was ineffective against demons. This further demonstrated why the resourceful ninja master had wielded the sword for centuries with no real progress. It was ineffective against demons, and the ninja master could only attack demons. Thea's frustration faded. If the creature on the ground wasn't working, then the enchanted witch in the distance would surely do, right? She didn't enter the manifestation anymore, using some of her mind to control it. She wanted to fight 2 against 1, a swift and decisive defeat. Wielding the 1.5-meter-long sword in one hand, Thea cast Wind Walk, swift as lightning. Within 100 meters, she reached the demon in a flash, grasping the sword with both hands, and struck down at her neck. The enchanted witch continued to summon shadowy creatures, attempting to hinder the manifestation's progress. Some were shadow leopards and snakes, which Thea herself could perform, as well as many bizarre creatures that were clearly not from the material world. Relying on a vast array of summons, she managed to temporarily hold off the manifested demon, whose power had been reduced by half and who had lost control of Thea's core. However, facing Thea's rapid advance, she dared not be complacent, summoning 2 long swords from thin air to block her demonic sword. Ever since her battle with the ninja master, Thea had also experienced the power of 2-weapon combat. Her inherently aggressive nature made sword and shield combinations unsuitable for her. She switched her single-handed sword, then drew her ice spear from her space ring with her left hand and unleashed a barrage of spray at the enchantress. Damn! The enchantress was so familiar with the spear that without it, she could have hidden within June Moon for years, rather than leaping out in such a hasty and suicidal manner. She hated the spear, but even as much as she hated it, she couldn't afford to let out a roar and blast her enemies with a surge of magic power. That was the protagonist's specialty. She didn't have that. She could resist the onslaught of freezing air with her magic for a while, but what then? By merging with June Moon's soul, she also understood the modern world of technology. June Moon was a doctor of archaeology. She had never seen a freezing gun, but she understood that such weapons consumed the same energy as the firearm itself. Using one's own magic to drain the energy of an opponent's technological weapon was foolish no matter how one considered it. The distant fire tornado, slowed down by her spell, was no longer as swift as before, but it was still slowly approaching. The enchantress had no time to reflect. In desperation, she severed her connection to the blood-draining circle beneath her and teleported away from the freezing aura. Thea pressed on, freezing gun in left hand, magic sword in right, and slashed at her. She used her sword to slash at close range, her gun to strike at farther distances. Thea dominated the situation. But she wasn't happy, rather distressed. The magic sword could absorb the enchantress's magic. Her first few strikes terrified her. Compared to Thea, her skills were mere kindergarten, and she could hide her twice in 3 strikes. The sword's impact on her body caused both health and mana loss. No one could withstand it. But after Thea absorbed some, she artificially released the magic power. This magic power differed not only in properties but also in characteristics from her own. While both possessed dark attributes, it was heavily impure and tinged with a deadly aura. Although Thea consumed almost anything to gain power, this energy was highly corrosive. Absorbing too much would make her, like the enchantress's initial appearance, a vivid portrayal of a necromancer without makeup. Anyone could tell she was a villain by her appearance. Thea wasn't at the point where she absolutely needed to absorb this energy, as she would die if she didn't. Without a second thought, she expelled the energy from her body, regretfully sheathing the magic sword and replacing it with the Godslayer sword. Chapter 325, Pursuit. She'd thought it was a sumptuous feast, but it turned out to be poisonous. Frustrated, Thea infused the Godslayer sword with fire magic and launched a barrage of slashes at the enchantress. Unaware she was being disdained, the enchantress was surprised to see her sheath her magic sword. Seeing her pull out a fiery red longsword, she had no time to think and struggled to cope. The two exchanged 7 or 8 more blows. The enchantress's martial arts were ordinary, but her teleportation was truly elusive. Unlike the day she'd relied on her scattered magic, now that she had regained her body, she could teleport anywhere she looked with near zero energy. Bang! With a resounding roar, the manifested demon unleashed a massive ring of fire centered on itself, annihilating the shadow creatures in one blow, and strode to her aid. Facing Thea alone, the enchant witch was no match, and with this demonic creature, she was even more vulnerable. She hurriedly dodged Thea's sword, only to be met directly by the demon's spiky tail. Snap! A resounding sound, the immense force distorted her face. Mid-air, her mind went blank. Seizing this golden opportunity, Thea thrust her sword through her back and out the front. The enchant witch used 3 short teleportations to dodge Thea's subsequent attacks. Half kneeling on the ground, her hands supporting her body, she spat out thick gulps of black blood. She was no Ares, the parallax demon, who could use energy to repair damaged bodies. In all these centuries, She had never suffered such severe injuries. The fire magic from the god-slaying sword was also steadily eroding her body, disrupting her internal magic circulation. She clutched her wound, her emerald green eyes fixed on Thea. Just as Thea thought she was preparing a powerful attack, she vanished like smoke before her eyes. Teleported again, but Thea soon realized the enemy wasn't around anymore, they'd fled. Activating the Eye of Horus, she tracked the direction the enemy's magic had vanished, and soon spotted the enchantress 2 kilometers away. The wound from the previous strike was far more severe than she'd imagined. Her broken magic cycle had rendered her unable to teleport long distances. The enchantress also realized this. While she lacked the Eye of Horus's superb range, she was extremely sensitive to magic and could sense Thea's gaze searching for her. Glancing at the battlefield around her, she saw the exchange of fire not far from her, Deadshot and Rick Flag. Rick, who had originally been left with 7 or 8 men, was being decimated by Deadshot. Though they were elite soldiers, Deadshot's marksmanship far outmatched them. Within 10 minutes of the exchange, 4 of his men had been killed, and the remaining few, including Rick Flag, were struggling to hold on. Entering the battlefield, the enchantress quickly assessed the situation and teleported to kill Deadshot. With these soldiers, she might be able to hinder Thea's pursuit. Years of mercenary service, exposed to the hail of bullets, had honed Deadshot's intuition. Although he didn't see any danger, he rolled forward, dodging a direct blow from the enchantress, who had teleported to his side. Realizing he was being attacked, he didn't even bother to look at the attacker. He raised his hands, aiming the silenced pistol on his wrist and firing wildly. The enchantress, finally finding some pleasure in bullying, felt incredibly refreshed. She ghosted around Deadshot, dodging left and right. In less than 3 seconds, Deadshot had already been stabbed twice, with the remaining blow blocked by his wrist guard. "You're so proud of bullying these non-magic people." Thea finally caught up, her spatial magic only rudimentary. Teleporting others was no problem, but she felt it was too dangerous to teleport herself. In the square, watching the approaching fire tornado, Thea wasted a moment. Thousands of people were still unconscious. She raised her hand and launched a tornado in the opposite direction, counteracting the fire tornado, redirecting it. This powerful move was effective against large-scale enemies, but less effective against single targets. She'd use it more carefully next time. She cancelled her manifestation and sprinted after them. Seeing the enchantress's blade mere centimeters from Deadshot's neck, Thea raised her hand and slapped out with a mage's hand. Her magic was now several times stronger than it had been that day. This low-level spell was instantly unleashed. The invisible hand slammed into Deadshot's stomach, sending him flying back 5 or 6 meters. "Thank you. Can you use more force?" Deadshot clutched his stomach and stumbled to his feet, shouting at Thea through gritted teeth. This blow was different from the one he'd used against a katana at the Ministry of Defense. Thea had held back then, but now, using it on Deadshot, it nearly ruptured his intestines. "You're welcome." Thea slashed down with her sword. The enchantress tried to teleport away, but Thea had already spotted her and sprayed her with her ice spear without stopping. The enchantress's teleportation was only halfway complete when her left hand was frozen. Thea's spray was at a tricky angle, and a massive column of ice connected her hand to the ground. The enchantress struggled twice, but failed to break free. Seeing Thea's ice spear begin to whine again, she knew from previous encounters that it had a malfunction before it could activate. But the gap was short, leaving her with little more than a second to react. She acted decisively, raising her right longsword and slashing down at her left arm. Puff, her left hand was severed below the elbow. Fortunately, the blood in the veins was nearly frozen, keeping the wound very cold. Besides the loss of a hand, the damage was minimal. The enchantress didn't dare look back and opted to teleport. Damn, such determination. Thea was somewhat impressed. The freeze gun only had a 1-second cooldown, so making such a quick decision was no small feat. After all, any damage to her body would be permanent. But the enemy had escaped right under her nose, and she had to pursue them. Just as she was about to take flight, Rick Flag frantically bundled 4 or 5 grenades together and threw them at her. Hastily, he materialized a yellow shield to block the violent explosion. "You're courting death?" Thea stared at Rick Flag. This man had betrayed his country for his lover, and now he wasn't even willing to sacrifice his own life? Few people would be unfazed by her captivating gaze. Rick Flag was human, so naturally he felt fear too. Perhaps it was because his heart was filled with imaginary emotions, his intense love offsetting some of his fear, while his willpower withstood the rest. Rick Flag remained silent, his M4A1 in hand, firing relentlessly at Thea. Then, the yellow-clad figure across from him raised a finger, and a golden beam of light approached him. Like an arrow. The yellow light pierced his skin and pierced his skull, and he knew nothing after that. Having instantly killed Rick Flag, Thea, seeing Deadshot's grimace, raised her hand to help him eliminate Rick's 2 remaining soldiers who were still firing. Then, scanning the area, she located the Enchantress and launched into the air, pursuing her. Deadshot, still clutching his stomach, was left on the ground. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.